I'm leveling up my stats in Marvel. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction, so don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 151 When Russell enjoyed peaceful times. After returning to Earth 404, everyone went their separate ways, except for Russell and Gia. Gia chose to stay at Wanda's house, focusing on meditation to accelerate her absorption of the luminous energy. She aimed to reach Russell's required strength as soon as possible to embark on her journey to find the Hell Dimension. Gia's enthusiasm for learning was high. In her heart, she was striving to save the Skrulls. She was the savior of the Skrulls, not Russell's employee. Russell, on the other hand, returned to the bookstore and quietly began reading. However, this time, he wasn't reading children's books or animal novels, but the Dark Tome. The Dark Tome, written billions of years ago by the fallen ancient god, the source of dark magic, the god of the underworld, Cynthia. It was both a spellbook and a dark artifact. Through the Dark Tome, one could influence reality, open energy channels, and borrow the power of Cynthia to elevate an ordinary dark magician to godhood. Of course, the price was enormous. At best, one's mind is affected, falling into paranoia without realizing it. At worst, one is projected by the god of the underworld, Sifin, who seizes one's body and usurps one's place. However, Russell was no ordinary dark magician. Russell opened the dark book, and words appeared layer by layer on the blank pages. This was a script Russell had never seen before, one he didn't recognize at all, but it didn't prevent him from understanding the information contained within the words. It was as if these words weren't the carriers of information, but the information itself. As Russell turned the pages, powerful dark magic revealed its mysteries to him. The ocean of dark magic was incredibly vast, and the dark book seemed endless. With each page Russell turned, a new page appeared. For a time, Russell was immersed in the sea of books, unable to extricate himself. Just as Russell opened the dark book, in the sealed dark temple on Mount Vendigore, a humanoid stone statue several meters tall trembled slightly. A moment later, a small portion of consciousness from a mysterious dimension descended there. It was none other than the god of the underworld, Sifin. He sensed that someone in this real universe was perusing the dark book. And not just any book, but one they were constantly reading. This was a sign of being drawn to the dark book. He believed that before long, that person would be corrupted by the dark book and unable to resist borrowing his power. At that time, he could collect that person's soul, possess their body, and return them to the real universe. 10 days and 10 nights passed quietly. Sifin noticed that the person had closed the dark book. But Sifin was in no hurry, he was very patient. In the reading room, Russell closed the dark book and stored it in the mirror space. Russell, how could you be so decadent? Have you forgotten the schedule we said before? Confucius said, I examine myself 3 times a day. You can't continue to be so engrossed in reading, day and night. Russell inwardly berated himself. His divine body made him tireless and thirstless, maintaining boundless energy at all times. Before he knew it, he'd been reading for 10 days and 10 nights straight, completely out of his human form, and had almost forgotten his important task. After a few self-reproachful words, Russell got up, opened a portal, and headed to Earth 65. When he returned from Earth 120,703, Gwen had also returned to Earth 65 during the school closure to visit relatives and friends. Before leaving, Gwen had told Russell to pick her up when school resumed. Thanks to the hard work of the construction workers and the help of some advanced technology, New York City had been largely repaired and was running again. Schools at all levels were about to reopen. 3 days and 3 nights later, after bringing Gwen back to Earth 404, on the 4th day, Gwen listlessly went to school with Wanda and Gaia. Russell also resumed his healthy routine of reading during the day and exercising and resting at night. As for why 4 people went to the same school while Pietro went to school alone? He was too fast. While Russell was enjoying his peaceful life, undercurrents were stirring everywhere. In the Vendigore Mountains, Sifin was beginning to question his existence. He could sense that the man was perusing his dark book every day. And he was doing so at an extremely fast pace, absorbing a vast amount of information from the Dark Book. But he couldn't understand why the man had never used the magic from the Dark Book. Shouldn't a normal mage practice their spells after learning them? At a secret SHIELD base, the new Director Coulson, Director Hill, Captain America Steve Rogers, Hawkeye Barton, and Black Widow Natasha gathered for a secret meeting. Also present were the rumored former director of SHIELD, Nick Fury, and the second Wasp, Hope Van Dyne. After Barton expressed surprise and joy upon first seeing Nick Fury alive, the meeting quickly got down to business. The reason for this secret meeting was that Hope, during the operation to capture Hydra, used her special ability to shrink her body using PIM particles to obtain crucial intelligence. After deciphering this intelligence, Nick Fury realized just how deeply S.H.I.E.L.D. had been infiltrated. If S.H.I.E.L.D. tried to eliminate these Hydra members on its own, the operation would inevitably be leaked. At that point, the situation would escalate and become uncontrollable. To maintain secrecy, Nick Fury needed to deploy another group of agents not part of the S.H.I.E.L.D. organization to arrest the Hydra members within S.H.I.E.L.D. However, this could easily arouse suspicion and resistance from existing S.H.I.E.L.D. members. Therefore, I need Steve, Barton, and Natasha to lead the team and execute this plan. Use Steve's influence to minimize any rebellious sentiment among other S.H.I.E.L.D. members. Agents Coulson and Hill will also assist you, Nick Fury explained to everyone his purpose in gathering the Avengers. Steve pondered for a moment, then nodded in agreement with Nick Fury's arrangement. After discussing the details of the operation, the meeting ended. Steve, Barton, and Natasha went to rehearse with the agents and prepare for the operation. Coulson and Hill returned to the SHIELD headquarters at the Curved Wing. Hope rushed back to her room for another meeting, a one-on-one meeting with Mephisto, the Lord of Hell. Completing SHIELD's mission in discovering Hydra's secret intelligence was merely an accident. Hope's true work during this time was searching for the witch Agatha Christie for Mephisto. And now, she had finally found a lead. Agatha Christie, disguised as a private tutor, lived in seclusion in New York, tutoring twins at a Bible tea shop. Inside the room, Hope appeared to be sitting in front of her computer, writing her monthly work report. In reality, she was having an internal conversation with Mephisto. My apostle, Hope Van Dyne. If your intelligence is accurate, I will fulfill my promise, but if there are any mistakes or omissions, don't blame me for being untrustworthy. Chapter 152 Mephisto's Scheme, Using One Tiger to Devour Another? After being extorted 2 billion units of energy from Russell, the Ancient One, with white beard, and the bald Ancient One in their first clash, Mephisto has been looking for a chance to get revenge. But personally intervening is out of the question. Even within his own hell dimension, he's hesitant to fight the Russell Ancient One trio, let alone in the real universe. Therefore, Mephisto devised a plan to use one enemy against another. First, he would use Hope, the second Wasp, to find Agatha Christie. Then, he would use Agatha to open a cross-dimensional portal, releasing Kurbolson, who was sealed away on Earth 616. Kurbolson, Odin's elder brother, also known as the Serpent, is the god of fear, able to amplify his power by harnessing the fear of others. Once the Serpent arrives on Earth, it will inevitably clash with Russell and the Ancient One. The former will inevitably slaughter indiscriminately to spread fear, while the latter, to protect the real world, will inevitably try to stop the Serpent. Mephisto could then sit back and watch the two sides fight, waiting for them to weaken each other before reaping the benefits. Not only could he reclaim his own energy, but with luck, he might even gain several powerful mage souls. This was Mephisto's plan. In an ordinary apartment in Queens, New York, Agatha, using the alias Agnes, was preparing her evening lesson materials. Since schools reopened, tutoring sessions had moved from daytime to evening. Suddenly, a crimson mist billowed from the room. An elderly man dressed in an expensive suit, a gentleman of British style, emerged from the mist. Agatha Harkness, long time no see. Agatha looked at the old man warily and asked, Mephisto, what brings you here? Our contract is over. Agatha had borrowed dark energy from Mephisto and signed a contract, becoming his apostle. But when Mephisto fell from his position as Satan, many dark magic mages like Agatha united to force him to break the contract. Theoretically, Agatha and Mephisto are no longer subordinate to each other. In reality, Mephisto is powerless to influence her in this dimension. As long as Agatha doesn't actively borrow power from Mephisto or sign a contract, he can't do anything to her. Agatha the Witch, one deal is over. Naturally, the next deal will begin, Compared to the wary Agatha, Mephisto appeared calm and collected. I know you've been seeking greater magical power. And I can provide that power. Why not make a deal? Agatha sneered. She realized that in this dimension, Mephisto was powerless against her. I do want to seek greater power, but I won't be foolish enough to make a deal with the Demon King again. Mephisto, in this world, no fool would make a second deal with a liar like you. Mephisto smiled calmly. He knew his reputation wasn't great. But in this world, some deals require reputation. More often, however, it's about profit. Agatha was wrong. Many people in this world would make multiple deals with Mephisto. Like Russell. The first deal, 2 billion units of energy from Mephisto. The second deal, 3 souls from Mephisto's hell. He wouldn't mind making several more deals with Mephisto. Agatha, why don't you hear my demands and reward first? No matter how tempting your reward is, I won't agree, Mephisto. Because I know you won't pay, Agatha sneered coldly. Mephisto ignored Agatha's sarcasm. He had come to Agatha with ample preparation. You're approaching a girl. Trying to steal her magical power, right? But you won't succeed. Want to know why? Agatha's expression changed. You're going to stop me? No. Mephisto shook his head, turning his body to look in the direction of the Maximoff milk tea shop, which was also the direction of the Russell bookstore. Agatha, didn't you notice? There's a powerful mage beside that girl. His power far exceeds your imagination. If you reveal your intentions, he can kill you instantly. Even if you absorb that girl's magic, chaos magic. Agatha's face darkened further. You can't fool me, Mephisto. You should have noticed that the area around the Maximoff milk tea shop and the nearby bookstore is under a spell of mind control, right? Mephisto asked. Of course I know. Wasn't that cast by the girl? Mind control is one of her awakened abilities, Agatha countered. No, the bookstore owner cast this spell. Agatha, if you observe carefully, you should be able to see that the essence of this magic is different from chaos magic, Mephisto explained. Even so, that doesn't prove how powerful this mage is, does it? Agatha questioned. At this moment, she was beginning to believe Mephisto. Mephisto, please watch the VCR. A crimson mist flickered, forming a phantom screen. On the screen was footage of Russell fighting Mephisto in the quantum realm. Moreover, it was the latter half, showing Russell brutally beating Mephisto. The bald ancient one, who was watching from the sidelines, was also in the frame. Agatha, even if you are lucky enough to successfully absorb that girl's energy, you probably have no chance against the Sorcerer Supreme, the Ancient One, and the Sorcerer Russell. Mephisto's voice was seductive. But if we cooperate, we can kill them both. Then, no one will stop you from trying to absorb that girl's energy. Agatha stared at the phantom screen, carefully observing Russell and the Ancient One in the distance. She recognized Russell, the killer who sank Sakura Island and annihilated the Sakura Pantheon. After a long while, Agatha asked, "What do I need to do?" Mephisto's lips curled into a smile. He knew Agatha had taken the bait. "You only need to open a gap in this real-world defensive array, and leave the rest to me. This shouldn't be too difficult for you, right? How can I guarantee my safety?" Agatha explained. "Mephisto, you might not know this. Someone in this world previously opened the defensive array and let a demon in. Afterwards, the entire pantheon was wiped out. It was the so-called Russell the mage you mentioned who did it." Mephisto was secretly alarmed, but remained calm. He hadn't actually noticed this information. After all, he wasn't constantly monitoring this world. "Agatha, if you want to absorb that girl, you'll inevitably take risks. Unless you abandon your plan." Chapter 153. If all 3 shots jam, I'll let you go. Night fell. In the bookstore's lounge, Russell put away the dark tome. Not because he'd finished reading it, nor because he was tired of it. It was because Wanda had arrived. It wouldn't matter if others accidentally glimpsed the dark tome, but Wanda was an exception. "Wanda, what brings you here? Shouldn't you be in tutoring right now?" Ignoring the Do Not Disturb sign on the lounge wall, Wanda pushed open the door, excitedly saying, "One of my tutors was absent today, so get out of class ended early." Russell understood Wanda's excitement. He'd been a student for over a decade before his transmigration. But understanding aside, someone who'd been caught in the rain often prefers to tear someone else's umbrella. It's like sophomores and juniors enjoying eating chilled watermelon during freshman military training. "Oh, one less class? That's great news, Wanda. To celebrate this good news, let's begin our joyful and delightful magical learning." Wanda's smile froze, and she gave Russell a resentful look. "Russell, I have something to attend to, so I'll be leaving now." Russell chuckled and walked out of the bookstore after a long absence. Since he started reading the Dark Tome, he had become a recluse, spending all his time in the bookstore reading. Aside from going to Earth 65 to pick up Gwen, he hadn't left the house for almost a month. On the streets of New York, Russell suppressed his senses, wandering aimlessly like an ordinary person. This was the only way to enjoy strolling. The rebuilt New York felt somewhat strange and new to Russell. So, he got lost. "Hey, young man, this isn't a place for you, get out of here," a middle-aged white man in overalls suddenly called out to Russell and waved him away. Russell looked in the direction of the voice and saw that the man leading the group and those behind him all had bulging waists and were carrying guns. The truck behind them was loaded with some kind of technology not from Earth. "Sorry, I'm lost. I accidentally wandered here. I'll leave now." Russell smiled at the white man and turned to leave. Click, the sound of a bullet being chambered echoed behind him. But no gunshot rang out. The middle-aged white man stopped his men from drawing their weapons. "Toms, why are you stopping me? If this guy tells the NYPD, we'll be in big trouble." The middle-aged man named Tom struggled with his expression, then sighed deeply. "Let's return this cargo." Steve and his team had already begun their operation, and they were moving quickly. The changes at SHIELD had affected the handling of alien warship wreckage near New York. Take the transport of warship wreckage as an example. Orders previously handled by Hydra members that had been completed needed to be reviewed again. Incomplete orders were cancelled. Tom's order was cancelled. Worse still, the truck was bought on loan, the workers were newly recruited, and this was his first order. "Toms, you'll go bankrupt like this." Hearing his companion's persuasion, Tom's face showed struggle again. "It was the government who unilaterally broke the agreement first. It's not our fault," his companion continued to persuade. Finally, Toms was convinced and said in a deep voice, "Give me the gun." Taking the gun from his companion, Toms strode after Russell in the direction he had disappeared. The gears of fate began to turn. Russell saw Toms, or rather, the Vulture's fate. His original fate was to intercept the wreckage of a warship that had been accidentally transported out at night and discover that he could use the wreckage to make many nice gadgets. From then on, he began to use the wreckage to develop weapons and sell them illegally to make money. To become a qualified Spider-Man villain, codenamed Vulture. In the end, he was defeated by the Spider-Man of this world. This was the fate that the Web of Life and Destiny had arranged for him. Toms quickly caught up and found Russell leaning against the wall at the corner, watching him leisurely. "Perhaps, you shouldn't have chased after me." If Toms hadn't chased after him, intending to kill him to silence him, Russell wouldn't have interfered much, whether he followed his predetermined fate or defied it and chose to stop. "No, you shouldn't have come here." Toms took a deep breath, made up his mind, and fired. "Sorry." Click. The bullet jammed. Toms pulled the bolt, ejecting the spent cartridge. He pulled the trigger. Click. It jammed again. Toms looked at Russell, who was still calmly watching him, his face filled with terror. The bullet jammed twice in a row. He couldn't help but suspect that the man before him had tampered with it. Especially now, with superhumans gradually emerging. "I didn't do anything to your gun," Russell shrugged indifferently. It wasn't him who stopped Toms, but the Web of Life and Fate. A gunshot rang out, and Toms would surely fall. Toms hesitated, unsure if this was divine intervention. Finally, Toms pulled the trigger again, ejecting the spent cartridge. Trembling, he pulled the trigger. If it was divine intervention, he believed it would jam this time too. Bang! The third time's the charm, and a shot rang out. However, the pistol was kicked away. The bullet also veered off course. Toms, the Vulture, had temporarily escaped with his life. The one who kicked Tom's pistol away was a girl in a white Spider-Man suit. The girl somersaulted in the air, struck a pose, and landed gracefully. She first glanced warily at Toms, who was clutching his wrist in pain, then turned to comfort Russell. "Don't be afraid, Spider-Man will protect Russell." "Why is it you?" The newcomer was none other than the bootleg Spider-Man, Aaron. Russell looked at Aaron with a helpless expression. He was now unsure whether Aaron's appearance was a coincidence or an arrangement of the Web of Life and Fate. "Why couldn't it be me, Aaron?" "Russell, how could you?" Aaron gestured, meaning how Russell could be held at gunpoint, seemingly helpless. Russell shook his head, offering no explanation. He stepped forward, picked up the pistol Aaron had kicked away, and looked at Tom's. "You just fired 3 shots at me, so I'll fire 3 shots at you. If all 3 shots jam, then I'll let you go." Without waiting for Tom's reaction, he quickly drew his gun and fired. Bang! 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 2 shots to the chest and 1 to the head. Even a god would shake his head. Tom's, the Vulture's fate was sealed. The web of life and fate had no effect on Russell. "Russell, you..." Only then did Aaron react, looking at Russell, hesitant to speak. Russell looked at Eileen and said seriously, "Eileen, he fired 3 shots at me, and I fired 3 shots at him. That's fair. You can't favor him just because I'm slightly stronger. In this world, weakness doesn't guarantee right. What an unlucky villain, running into me before even leaving the starting area. But New York City is indeed a place teeming with talent. You can encounter a villain just by strolling around." Ignoring Eileen's reaction, Russell turned and left, continuing his stroll. Chapter 154 Tony's Bachelor Party. Russell continued his aimless wandering, soaking in the everyday atmosphere, until he passed a coffee shop. Inside, a couple was chatting and laughing intimately. The man had a thick head of light blonde hair, like a lion's. The woman also had blonde hair. Noticing Russell's gaze, the blonde man turned to look at him. He stood up, smiled, and opened his arms to walk towards Russell. "Good evening, Russell." "Good evening, Thor." Russell smiled back and gave the enthusiastic Thor a polite hug. "Russell, let me introduce you." Thor took Russell's arm and led him into the coffee shop. "This is Jane. Jane Foster, my girlfriend." After introducing Jane Foster to Russell, Thor then introduced Russell to Jane Foster. "Jane, this is Russell, my brother." "Hello, Jane." Russell smiled and greeted Jane Foster. After exchanging pleasantries, Russell asked curiously, "Thor, Jane, can you tell me how you met?" In the original plot of the movie Thor was stripped of his divine powers by Odin and banished to Earth for instigating a war between the Frost Giants and Asgardians. There, he met and fell in love with Jane Foster, an astrophysicist. However, in Earth 404 universe, Russell single-handedly confronted Jotunheim and suppressed the Frost Giants. Thor escaped Odin's punishment. Although Thor eventually came to Earth, how did Thor, who hadn't lost his divine powers, meet and fall in love with immortal Jane Foster? Russell was very curious about this. Jane Foster looked at Thor. The process of how she met Thor involved some confidentiality clauses with an SHIELD, and she wasn't sure if she could talk about it. Thor, on the other hand, didn't consider these things at all and answered directly. Because of Russell's actions on Sakura Island, he provoked other countries on Earth and SHIELD. They began secretly researching the Tesseract, attempting to use it to create high-tech weapons. The commotion caused by the activation of the Tesseract caught Thanos' attention. Thanos dispatched Ebony Maw and Black Dwarf to raid the SHIELD base, stealing the Tesseract and slaughtering half the staff, using the coordinates sent during its activation. Dr. Eric, the project's chief engineer, tragically died, and his surviving assistant, Jane Foster, was taken to SHIELD in his place for an emergency meeting. At the meeting, Jane Foster and Thor met. "You two are truly destined for each other, as if it were fate," Russell remarked. The plot had changed so drastically, yet the two still met and fell in love. It was as if an unseen force was subtly influencing everything. Thor and Jane Foster exchanged a smile and said in unison, "Yes, I think so too." Russell smiled. His understanding differed somewhat from Thor and Jane Foster's. Russell was concerned with fate, the shared fate of the multiverse. Thor and Jane Foster were focused on fate, the unexpected meeting and love between two people who were originally completely unrelated. However, while Spider-Man's destiny is woven by the web of life and fate, what is woven into Thor's destiny? The gods behind the world tree? After greeting Thor and Jane Foster, Russell continued his wanderings. He suddenly had a premonition that he would encounter something unusual tonight. "Thor, who is he?" Jane Foster asked softly after Russell had walked away. She thought Russell was a bit eccentric. "He's Russell." "Jane, haven't you heard that name before, Russell? That's a common name. I've heard it in many places." She remembered hearing that name at an emergency meeting at the SHIELD helicarrier. The use of the Tesseract to research weapons was to guard against the owner of that name and Thor. And the two who easily dismantled the entire SHIELD base's defenses, their leader and the entire fleet, were also easily destroyed by that man named Russell. Is that Russell? Yes. Oh my God, Jane Foster exclaimed softly. Soon after, Russell's wanderings were interrupted. As he strolled through the streets, a flashy sports car suddenly stopped beside him. The window rolled down, revealing Tony, dressed in a suit and sunglasses. Get in. Where to? Russell walked around to the other side, opened the car door, got in, and fastened his seatbelt. You'll see when we get there. The car sped off. Drive slower, Russell reminded him. This is the city. With Jarvis's help, even double the speed wouldn't cause any problems. It's not about causing problems, it's about getting a ticket. Tony smiled smugly. The NYPD won't give me a ticket. I'm their big spender. A moment later, the car stopped at a harbor. A private yacht was already docked, ready to set sail. Oh, a yacht party? Russell raised an eyebrow and asked. How? Tony chuckled, offering no explanation, and simply led the way. Several people were already waiting on the yacht. Tony, why are you so slow? I couldn't get through to Russell on the phone, and I couldn't find him at his bookstore either. It was only thanks to Jarvis that I found him on street surveillance footage, Tony explained, then told the captain to set sail for a nearby island. Contrary to Russell's expectations, this wasn't a yacht party, but an island party. However, Russell glanced around. Happy, Rhodes, Banner, Steve, Pietro, Loki, all the guests Tony had invited on the yacht were men. Hey, Tony, what's going on? Why are they all men? Is this some kind of shady party? Hearing Russell's words, the others looked at Tony strangely. Get lost, Tony laughed and cursed. This is my bachelor party. Tony, you've decided to get married? Who's the bride? Pepper, Rhodes asked. Yes. Upon arriving at the isolated island, the villa was brightly lit, illuminating half the night sky and standing out prominently. Before the group could even enter, blasting music assaulted their eardrums. They opened the door. Colorful lights flashed, and young, beautiful girls danced. Welcome to my bachelor party, ladies and gentlemen. Tony stepped onto the stage, picked up the microphone, and declared arrogantly, let's enjoy this night to the fullest. Steve frowned and shook his head. He disliked such occasions. Pietro seemed slightly awkward. He was still young and not quite comfortable in these settings. Dr. Banner quickly took a few deep breaths. He needed to control himself and the Hulk. Happy and Rodlock moved with ease towards the crowd. Russell smiled knowingly. He had a premonition that something unusual would happen tonight. Chapter 155. That year I was 18, standing like a scoundrel. Russell approached Dr. Banner, patted him on the shoulder, and a flash of silver light disappeared. Dr. Banner, go ahead and have your fun. The Hulk won't be coming out tonight. Dr. Banner's expression shifted. He felt his connection to the Hulk had been severed. Dr. Banner watched Russell's retreating figure, his eyes flickering. For some time now, Dr. Banner had been researching how to eliminate or control the Hulk, but without progress. He never imagined that the problem that had troubled him for so many days would be solved so easily by Russell's casual pat. Meanwhile, Russell walked to a relatively quiet corner and found a woman who seemed out of place. I thought Tony's bachelor party would be full of young, pretty girls, except for us. The woman raised an eyebrow, her tone unfriendly. What, am I not pretty? Russell replied without hesitation. You're not young, sir. You're really impolite. Huh? Is it impolite of me to compliment your beauty? Russell said innocently. I don't have time for your nonsense. I'm not like those scumbags. Go find someone else. The woman said this, then got up and walked towards Tony, trying to push her way through the crowd. Russell smiled nonchalantly, picked up the coconut juice he just swiped from somewhere, and started drinking. He recognized the woman, Maya Hansen. A botanist, she'd had a one-night stand with Tony at a science gala over a decade ago. Of course, that wasn't the point. The point was, she was one of the key researchers of the extremis virus. The other was Killian. He was also at that science gala. Like Maya Hansen, he had his eye on Tony. However, he'd been stood up and had waited all night on the rooftop. Tony, I have something important to discuss with you. Maya Hansen couldn't get past the young girls. Desperate, she could only shout from the outside, trying to attract Tony's attention. Unfortunately, the music was loud, and there were countless girls calling Tony's name. A moment later, Maya Hansen returned to Russell's side, anxiously saying, I need to speak with Tony urgently. Can you get him out here? Russell glanced up at Maya Hansen but ignored her. Maya Hansen took a deep breath and said seriously, I'm serious. I've received word that someone is planning an attack here. We must notify Tony immediately and evacuate the area. I know, but so what? Everyone here will die, including you. Russell smiled. Seeing that Russell remained unmoved, Maya Hansen became increasingly agitated and couldn't help but curse. Fuck. I'm not lying to you, I believe you. But I don't care. Russell shrugged indifferently and suggested, if I were you, I would go find that person and ask for help. Russell pointed in the direction of Steve. Even though Steve had chosen a secluded corner to sit down, a group of girls had still gathered around him. Who is he? Steve Rogers, Captain America. Didn't he disappear 70 years ago? Disappeared, not dead, right? Russell retorted. Believe it or not, Maya Hansen walked towards Steve with skepticism. This time, she finally managed to squeeze in and strike up a conversation with Steve. But it was too late. Somewhere, a tall, well-dressed man with slicked back hair was looking down at a stopwatch, counting down. The smile on his lips grew wider and wider. More than a decade ago, Tony Stark made him wait in the cold wind all night. Tonight, he would make Tony Stark die in an explosion and flames. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom, the countdown ended, and a blinding flash of light suddenly appeared. The extremis virus, once injected, could enhance the body in all aspects, with self-healing abilities being particularly outstanding. But there was a major side effect: instability. It could easily turn the injector into a living bomb. Several of the girls inside the villa were human bombs injected with the extremis virus by Killian. In the instant the flames erupted, time seemed to stand still for the three of them. Loki first looked at Russell, who smiled at him but did nothing. Looking away, Loki gazed at the source of the flames and saw a pile of flesh gathering together, slowly shooting outwards. At the same time, someone tried to grab the pile of flesh and run towards the open space outside the villa. Noticing Loki looking at him, the person turned and smiled back. It was Pietro. Loki formed a hand seal, spraying a blast of cold air onto the flesh, temporarily freezing it into ice, making it easier for Pietro to grab. Pietro nodded gratefully to Loki. The next instant, time resumed its normal flow. Boom! A deafening roar echoed outside the villa. The shockwave slammed into the villa walls, sending debris flying. After the roar, there was a brief silence. Screams erupted, and the crowd instantly descended into chaos. Dr. Banner, with a beautiful woman in his arms, froze. Damn it, Hulk couldn't get out. Quiet. Everyone down. Steve and Colonel Rhodes tried to calm the crowd and restore order, but to little avail. Jarvis, Tony opened a portal, and a suit of armor flew in from the other side, quickly donning the suit. There's more than one human bomb, Pietro. I'll point them out to you, and you take them away. Donning the suit, Tony regained his composure. Using infrared scanning, he pointed out the individuals with abnormal body temperatures to Pietro. Pietro cooperated, leading them away from the party and the villa. Rumble. 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 3 more booming sounds signaled the end of the crisis and the party. Jarvis, alert mode. Tony stepped out of the suit, his face grim as he looked at the chaotic scene. The bachelor party being ruined was a minor matter, the important thing was finding the mastermind. Tony considered himself somewhat capable of protecting himself, but Pepper Potts wasn't. Soon, he'd be a married man too. Tony, this female doctor says she has a lead, Steve said, leading Maya Hansen to Tony. This time, no one crowded around Maya Hansen. Looking at Maya Hansen, whom Steve had brought over, Tony said indifferently, "Hello, Mom. What leads do you have?" Maya Hansen looked at Tony with a mournful expression. She hadn't expected Tony to have forgotten her. "Don't you remember me, Tony?" Tony frowned. "Sir." "Her name is Maya Hansen. On New Year's Eve in 1999, at the Bern Science and Technology Gala in Switzerland, you had a one-night stand with her." Jarvis's voice came through the earpiece, reminding Tony. "I remember now, you're Dr. Hansen." "Dr. Hansen, what leads do you have regarding this attack? Please tell me." If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156 Loki, is magic really such an inconvenient thing? Maya Hansen gestured to their surroundings. "I need to talk to you alone, not here. And we'd better move quickly and hide." "That's right, Tony, Steve agreed. We're exposed here, we can't stay any longer, I know. But what about the others if we leave? Jarvis, arrange a cruise ship to send these girls back first. Although the situation was urgent, Tony's sense of responsibility prevented him from abandoning these ordinary people. Steve nodded, agreeing with Tony's arrangement, but loudly reminded everyone to be vigilant. Tony led Maya Hansen to a room and suddenly whispered, "Do you really have a lead? Don't tell me I have a child I haven't seen in 11 years. I have a girlfriend, and we're engaged. He's 12 years old, Tony." "Just kidding." Maya Hansen couldn't help but laugh at Tony's startled expression. "I really do have a lead. I know who masterminded this attack is, Aldrich Killian. The weapon he used in this attack is the Extremis virus." "The Extremis virus?" Tony asked. "The Extremis virus I used to perfect the equation." "Yes," Maya Hansen nodded. "Why did he attack me?" Tony asked, puzzled. "According to you, he should be thanking me, right, because you stood him up. By the way, where's Russell?" Steve suddenly remembered that there was another big shot here. "Russell? I just saw him leave with Loki," Pietro said. After those suicide bombers were identified, Russell and Loki left. He could roughly guess what would happen next. After failing to take advantage of information to ambush and kill Tony in the first wave, Killian had no chance. Tony wouldn't give him a second chance. And in a head-on battle, the enhanced Tony could easily defeat Killian injected with the Extremis virus. Back in the bookstore lounge, Russell invited Loki to sit down and poured him a cup of tea. "Try it," Loki thanked him, first picking up the teacup to smell the aroma, then swirling the bowl 1.5 times before taking small sips. After finishing, he cleaned his lips, then turned the bowl back to its original position. His manners were impeccable. Truly worthy of being the second prince of Asgard. However, this wasn't the point. Russell tapped the table lightly, and tea gushed from the bottom of the cup, filling it again. "Loki, how's your time magic coming along?" Loki raised an eyebrow, understanding Russell's meaning. He picked up the cup and drank it all in one gulp, then placed it back on the table. The next moment, tea continued to gushing from the bottom of the cup, then disappearing. However, the speed at which the tea gushed was noticeably faster than the speed at which it disappeared. A short while later, the cup was full again. "Not bad, Loki," Russell exclaimed in admiration. Just now, they had competed in time magic. Russell had reversed time in the teacup, while Loki had tried to stop him. Although Loki had lost, he had demonstrated considerable skill. Considering that Loki had only recently acquired the Ancient One's collection of books and lacked the aid of the Time Stone, it could be said that he possessed an exceptionally high talent for time magic. Facing Russell's praise, Loki simply smiled, not taking it seriously. True to his word, he picked up the teacup and drank it all in one gulp before placing it back on the table. Again, the tea in the cup repeated its process of appearing and disappearing. This time, the time it took for the cup to refill was slightly longer. Again. Loki repeatedly picked up his teacup, drank it all in one gulp, then placed it on the table, waited for it to refill, and then drank it all again. After a long time, Loki was starting to feel the strain. Although the two controlled their energy output, limiting it to just one cup of tea and competing in skill, the sheer number of repetitions was taking its toll on Loki's time magic. "Russell, why is your proficiency so much higher than mine?" Loki couldn't help but ask curiously. Towards the end, he had reached a limit. Logically, he should be almost on par with Russell. Even if he was slightly behind, the difference would be minimal. It was like a test paper, he was already above 90 points, at most 10 points short of the maximum. But in reality, the tea disappeared much slower than it appeared. This difference was greater than 10 points. Russell smiled mysteriously. "Loki, are you feeling full and need to go to the toilet?" Loki's face darkened, he understood Russell's meaning. "Mage Russell, you're cheating." During the time magic competition, Russell even used special magic to move some tea over. This means his perfect score on this test wasn't 100. Facing Loki's accusation, Russell retorted magnanimously, "Loki, is magic such an inconvenient thing? Analyze specific problems specifically. When solving problems, different combinations of magic should be used depending on the circumstances, you can't generalize." Loki stared at Russell for a while, then smiled with relief. This at least showed that his time magic proficiency was already very close to Russell's. And Russell's proficiency was almost perfect. Thanks to the bonus talent of his first talent, Energy absorption. Russell was extremely sensitive to the energy flow during spellcasting. Every time his panel leveled up, this sensitivity would improve significantly. This allowed him not only to learn various spells at a glance, but also to quickly reach a very high level of proficiency. Loki got up, took a new cup, poured some tea, and pushed it in front of Russell. He wanted to try again with Russell. Only this time, it was the other way around. Russell picked up his teacup, sipped slowly, and savored the sweetness of the tea. He was confident he only needed to drink it once. After finishing the tea, Russell placed the cup on the table. The next moment, the cup instantly filled with tea. Russell raised an eyebrow. This wasn't time magic, nor space magic, but an illusion. An illusion created by Loki's magic. Only now, it belonged to Russell. The tea in the cup also instantly emptied. Loki, your illusion is no good, I saw through it. Next, the cup continuously shifted between full and empty. Loki kept adding layers of the illusion of a full cup. Russell simply didn't try to break it. Instead, after Loki added a layer of the illusion of a full cup, he added a layer of the illusion of an empty cup. Finally, Loki stopped. In fact, Loki had already lost when the illusion was seen through. He only became interested in competing because he saw that Russell had used his magic to break it. If Russell hadn't realized it was an illusion, neither time magic nor space magic could have emptied the cup, because it was already empty. But since he recognized it as an illusion, the illusion lost its meaning. That's enough, Loki. I need to rest. Russell began to shoo him away. He saw Gwen return. Chapter 157 Russell's Divine Book. However, Loki seemed oblivious to Russell's intention to send him away. Or rather, he understood, but pretended not to. He desperately wanted to know why Russell knew his magic, and used it better than him. Russell, why do you know my spells? All spells rely on energy, and I can perceive the flow of energy. Therefore, no spell holds a secret for me. I can learn it after seeing it once. At the very least, I can replicate it. How do you do that? Loki asked incredulously. I don't know, but I can do it. It's my talent. Loki, don't be envious, because envy is useless. I can't teach you, and you can't learn it either. Russell shrugged. Loki, you don't need to be envious. The potential within you is beyond your imagination. Continue to study time magic, and you will reap unexpected rewards. If you encounter problems while studying time magic, Russell paused. Just as Loki and Gwen thought Russell was about to say that they could ask him for advice if they encountered any problems, Russell changed his tone. If you encounter a problem, try to figure it out yourself first. If you can't figure it out on your own, you can ask the Ancient One. The Ancient One has wielded the Time Stone for hundreds of years and has a very deep understanding of time magic. In short, don't come to me, I can't teach you for now. Russell's spellcasting method differed from other sorcerers. His method directly addressed the essence of energy manipulation, while other sorcerers required incantations, hand gestures, runes, and other mediums. Therefore, Russell said he couldn't teach Loki. But this was only temporary. Russell had already found a way. After seeing Loki off, Russell chatted with Gwen about their day. There wasn't much to say about school. Gwen mainly told Russell about the daily work of her newly formed superhero team. Also, the team was preparing a name for their official debut as superheroes and street performers, but they didn't know what to name it. Russell said he was terrible at naming things and couldn't help. He could only help Gwen clear her mind and find inspiration. That was his forte. The next day, a refreshed Russell began his workday. His tasks: open the reading room door, then return to the lounge to read the Dark Book. Russell had recently become somewhat obsessed with the Dark Book. He could quickly absorb the information contained in every word within it. He could quickly learn every spell in the Dark Tome without needing a demonstration. Flipping through the Dark Tome not only increased Russell's spell repertoire, but also allowed him to learn its informational methods. If he mastered this method, he could solve the problem of not being able to communicate spell knowledge with other mages. As a sorcerer supreme, he couldn't be unable to even answer a novice mage's questions, could he? Vishanti was the progenitor of white magic, possessing the Book of Vishanti. Sifin was the progenitor of black magic, possessing the Dark Tome. Russell felt that his luminous white energy could also create a school of magic. He also wanted to write a Russell's Tome. Then, each of his apostles would have a copy of the Russell's Tome. This would quickly build up their fighting power and also serve as advertising for the trade of luminous white energy. At Mount Vendigor, Sifin's thoughts stirred. It was about to begin. The man's reading of the Dark Tome had been very regular lately, and Sithin had already figured out the pattern. It started around 2 p.m. every day, time zone difference. The next moment, Sithin sensed someone opening his Dark Tome. But, judging from the speed of the flipping, it wasn't that person. Just as Sithin was wondering, he sensed someone opening his Dark Tome again. This time, the speed of the flipping matched the pattern Sithin had observed over this period. There are 2 Dark Tomes in this world. After a moment's thought, Sithin understood what was happening. The second person to open the Dark Tome was the witch Agatha. Unlike Russell, she couldn't resist the corruption of the Dark Tome. However, she hadn't completely fallen. Sithin couldn't directly devour her soul or possess her body. But Sithin still extended his gaze beyond Mount Vundergul through Agatha. Unlike Russell, who aimlessly flipped through the pages, Agatha quickly turned to a specific page of the Dark Tome, ignoring the contents of the other pages. This was a key reason why she hadn't completely fallen. And the title of that page in the Dark Tome was, The Scarlet Witch. The Dark Book devoted an entire chapter to describing the Scarlet Witch. In its account, the Scarlet Witch was unlike any other witch. She didn't need a witch's head or incantations to cast spells. She possessed greater power than other witches, yet the limitations on using that power were fewer. As Agatha gazed at the description of the Scarlet Witch in the Dark Book, her eyes burned with increasing fervor. She had to become the Scarlet Witch. Meanwhile, Sithin, observing from Agatha's perspective, was also puzzled. He wondered why Agatha was focusing solely on the chapter about the Scarlet Witch. And it seemed she had read it more than once or twice. Could it be that someone in this world had become the Scarlet Witch? A sudden thought struck Sithin. Could it be that the other person reading the Dark Book was the Scarlet Witch? This thought fueled Sithin's own burning desire. The limits of power that an ordinary body could contain, compared to the Scarlet Witch's, were worlds apart. Snap, Agatha closed the Dark Book, preparing to depart. After Mephisto revealed his plan, she agreed to cooperate, but not entirely. In short, she would help Mephisto open the teleportation portal, but not herself. She feared that if she did it herself, Mephisto might fail, and the so-called God of Terror, the Serpent, would be no match for Russell and the Ancient One. Or perhaps Russell and the Ancient One wouldn't stop the Serpent immediately, but instead come to cause her trouble. She found someone to do it for her. This person was Caecilius. Caecilius had studied under the Ancient One and become a master of arcane arts. Later, consumed by his inner demons, he became obsessed with power and betrayed Camartage. He even attempted to contact the Master of Dark Energy, sacrificing the entire universe in exchange for power. In Agatha's view, Caecilius was the most suitable scapegoat. First, he understood the defenses of Camartage's 3 shrines, making it easier to find weaknesses. Secondly, he is a traitor to Camartage and is being hunted by her, so he has no fear of offending her. Most importantly, by using the power of the God of Terror as bait, it would be easy to lure him into the trap and have him fight for him and Mephisto. Chapter 158 The one chosen to summon the Great Serpent, Caecilius. In a mysterious palace, a middle-aged man with a dark red rune on his forehead was conducting a summoning ritual with several subordinates. The man drew a crimson rune, identical to the one on his forehead, by tracing a line in the air with his finger. He chanted, "We now accept the energy that can destroy us and the entire world." His subordinates followed, shouting in unison, "We summon you, Demon King. Here are summons, come to us. Let us see your true form." "We are summoning." As the incantation ended, a mysterious magic circle appeared beneath their feet. The ground seemed to begin to twist and deform. Not only the ground, but the surrounding walls and ceiling also twisted and deformed. The entire world seemed to roll like gears. Then, the Demon King did not respond. Although the commotion was considerable, it was undeniable that the summoning ritual had failed once again. Moments later, the palace returned to normal. The middle-aged man and his subordinates dejectedly gathered their spellcasting materials. "Caecilius, your Demon King doesn't seem to want to respond to you. Perhaps he is dead, or banished." A voice, neither male nor female, without any distinguishing features, suddenly rang out within the palace. The owner of the voice was Agatha. Leveraging her centuries-old network of connections, she successfully located Caecilius after some time. The reason she didn't use her own voice was, of course, to conceal her identity. The middle-aged man, no, it was Caecilius. Caecilius looked in the direction of the voice and saw a tall, broad figure shrouded in a black robe. A cowardly coward dares to spout such nonsense here. As Caecilius's icy voice fell, the space within the palace distorted and warped once more. Especially in the area where Agatha was located, the world seemed to spin. But no matter how the surrounding space shifted, Agatha remained firmly standing, her figure never swaying. If one looked closely, one would see that her feet were slightly off the ground, floating in the air. Caecilius, I mean no harm, and I don't want to fight you, otherwise, it wouldn't be just me here. It would be the Ancient One, the Sorcerer Supreme, or Russell, the sorcerer who shone on Cherry Blossom Island. Agatha's voice remained emotionless and flat, like a robot's. But her tone didn't diminish the persuasiveness of her words. Caecilius snorted coldly, pressing his hands down, and the surrounding space returned to calm. Judging by your cowardly appearance, if you went to find the Sorcerer Supreme, you'd probably be captured before you even reported me. Agatha remained non-committal, ignoring Caecilius's sarcasm, and instead took out a parchment scroll. This parchment scroll contains the method to summon another demon lord. Since the previous demon lord didn't respond to your summons, why not try a different one, a different demon lord? Caecilius was somewhat tempted. Which demon lord? The god of terror, the father of the gods, the king of Asgard, Corbolson. Agatha's tone, unusually animated, became passionate, as if she were reciting or praising some extraordinary deity. In fact, Agatha didn't know who Corbolson was, only that he came from another universe. The god of terror? The father of the gods? The king of Asgard. Caecilius repeated the demon king's title. He had never heard of Corbolson. But he knew that the current king of Asgard was named Odin Borson. According to Asgardian naming conventions, Borson referred to Bor's son. Therefore, this god of terror, Kor, must be Odin's brother. I've never heard of this Corbolson. I only know that the king of Asgard is Odin. Odin Borson. Caecilius, you're incredibly ignorant. Agatha feigned disdain. As a mage, you should understand the concept of the multiverse, right? You should know that besides our own universe, there are other universes, and this one comes from another reality universe. He is the Asgardian god king there. Caecilius was even more intrigued. How powerful is he? Is he strong enough? Agatha maintained her disdainful tone. Caecilius, you should know what a dimensional lord is, right? The demon lord you summoned is the lord of the dark dimension. This great god of terror, the father of the gods, the Asgardian god king, has defeated and killed countless dimensional lords. Your demon lord doesn't even dare to face him directly. Otherwise, he'll only face death. Caecilius, still somewhat doubtful, took the parchment from Agatha. Inscribed on the parchment was a green rune, a summoning circle, and an incantation. I will try to communicate with this god of terror and summon him. If he can grant me enough power. Caecilius gripped the parchment tightly. With his magical prowess, he immediately recognized the function of the magic circle and the characteristics of the green rune. Terror. A nameless, insane, and irrational fear. Truly worthy of the title God of Fear. Even before Agatha could persuade Caecilius, Mephisto had already begun persuading the serpent Corbolson. Serpent, being in prison must be tough. I have a way to release you, but you must help me once. Through the seal, Mephisto called out to the serpent. Agreed, a deep voice replied immediately. The owner of the voice was undoubtedly the serpent Corbolson. Hearing the serpent's immediate agreement, Mephisto was slightly taken aback. This fool, couldn't he at least agree on a time frame and a time limit for his intervention? Otherwise, even if Mephisto did nothing, once the serpent was released, he would still have to help him. Despite his inward grumbling, Mephisto quickly drafted the agreement. The serpent glanced at the agreement, found nothing amiss, and signed it. This time, Mephisto was truly speechless. Were these Asgardian gods all muscle in their brains? By the way, Mephisto, aren't you afraid Odin and Thor will find out? I heard Thor has become quite powerful, the serpent asked belatedly, as if remembering something. This wasn't the first time he had been sealed away. The last time he escaped, he fought Thor to a standstill, both dying and falling into hell. However, with their strength, death wasn't the end. They both fought their way back to Earth. Mephisto explained, Serpent, I will send you to another reality universe, Earth 404. The Odin and Thor in that universe are not as powerful as those in Earth 616. You can first create fear in Earth 404 to regain your power. Then, return to Earth 616. Chapter 159 This Hammer of Winter, Kamar-Taj wants it. In another mysterious palace, Caecilius obtained the parchment again. After examining it and finding no problems, he decisively performed a summoning ritual with the other rogue mages. These mages, corrupted by dark energy, only wanted power and to destroy the world. It didn't matter who they obtained the power from or who would destroy the world. Unlike Dormammu, the serpent responded to them. Moreover, the serpent was extremely generous. My apostle, take up my weapon and spread fear for me. When fear covers this planet, I will descend. A green portal opened, and a long-handled hammer radiating a cold aura passed through the portal and landed before Caecilius. Just one glance at the hammer sent a chill down Caecilius's spine. Undoubtedly, this was a divine artifact. It could provide the user with immense power. With fanaticism, Caecilius humbly picked up the hammer before him. A name appeared in his mind, the Hammer of Skadi, also known as the Hammer of Winter. Holding it granted the power of the winter goddess Skadi. Just as Caecilius picked up the Hammer of Winter, 7 hammers fell from the sky like meteors, scattering across the world. While not as powerful as the Hammer of Winter, these 7 hammers were still powerful magical artifacts, capable of granting their wielders extraordinary strength. More importantly, they could control their wielders, turning them into apostles of the serpent, spreading fear throughout the serpent realm. In the night sky, Tony, having just defeated Killian, was flying towards a newly built mansion on the outskirts of New York, enjoying a leisurely ride. Although he couldn't feel the wind, he could feel the exhilarating sensation of flight brought by the thrusters. This was something that portal magic couldn't match. Hey, Jarvis, is that a meteor over there, sir? According to the high-definition camera footage, it's definitely a hammer. A hammer? Thor's hammer? No, it's not Thor's hammer, Jarvis denied, repairing the image and projecting it in front of Tony. Oh, interesting, a hammer falling from the sky. Come on, Jarvis, let's go check it out. Tony turned and flew towards where the hammer had fallen. Tony wasn't the only one who noticed the abnormality of the meteors. Director Callison, abnormal energy fluctuations detected. At SHIELD headquarters, a young agent knocked on Callison's office to report. Report the information to the board, Callison said listlessly. Director Callison, shouldn't we send someone to investigate? The young agent asked, puzzled. No need. SHIELD is about to disband. After a brief silence, the young agent replied reluctantly, yes, Director Callison. Watching the young agent's departing figure, a look of confusion flashed in Callison's eyes. Once upon a time, he was also a young agent with full enthusiasm and a positive work attitude, taking initiative and responsibility. He was very dissatisfied with those leaders who held positions without doing any work, but now, he had become the kind of person he used to hate. Sky, come back. After hesitating, Callison called to the young agent who had just left. Get someone to prepare the aircraft. We'll go check out the anomalous energy reaction point outside New York. But, Director Callison, isn't SHIELD going to disband? Sky asked. Her previous silence wasn't because she was unwilling to give up this operation, but because she was unwilling to see SHIELD disband. Joining SHIELD as an internal agent would give her access to more databases, which was very important to her. She needed to use the information in these databases to find out the truth about her origins. Everything she knew about her origins before was just a document edited by SHIELD. Callison was unaware of Sky's inner thoughts. He still thought the young agent in front of him was like himself in his youth. So, Callison smiled and said gently yet authoritatively, SHIELD is only about to disband, not yet. As long as SHIELD doesn't disband, it will continue to fulfill its duties, protecting the people of Earth from supernatural forces. This is the duty entrusted to us by the World Security Council, and it is also a right. Sky remained silent. She didn't care about duties or power. All she knew was that contacting these supernatural events was extremely dangerous. And she was just an internal affairs agent. She had no intention of going on field missions. Okay, Director Callison. I'll contact the action team for you right away. Outside New York, Tony stood in the center of a large crater, several meters in diameter, looking at the hammer at his feet, his expression grim. He was guarding the spot, preventing anyone else from touching the hammer. Just moments ago, when he tried to pick it up, his mind had been severely corrupted. Fortunately, his mind, honed through days of arduous magical training, was much stronger than the average person. Combined with a tiny amount of enhancement from the luminous white energy given by Russell, he wasn't directly controlled by the hammer. Realizing something was wrong, Tony immediately dropped the hammer. But his mental world was still slightly affected. At this moment, in Tony's mental world, luminous white energy was annihilating green energy. A moment later, a fighter jet arrived. But the insignia on the jet wasn't from SHIELD. Several agents, having just disembarked from the fighter jet, addressed Tony rudely. "Hello, Mr. Stark. We're taking over the scene. Please leave." "Who are you?" "Intelligent Weapons Observation and Response Center, SWOP, an agent replied. "Jarvis, has this organization been registered with Congress?" Tony ignored the agent and asked Jarvis instead. "Sir, no such organization's name can be found in publicly available congressional records. In other words, this is an illegal organization." As Jarvis's voice rang out, the expressions of the agent's present turned grim. To put it bluntly, an unreported secret organization like theirs was indeed an illegal organization. It's just that no one dared to bring it up openly. As an illegal organization, they naturally had no law enforcement authority, let alone the right to take over the scene and let Tony leave. Just as the two sides were locked in a stalemate, another fighter jet arrived, a Quinjet from SHIELD. However, strictly speaking, SHIELD was also an illegal organization. Stepping off the Quinjet, Coulson ignored the SWORD agents and greeted Tony first. "Tony, what are you doing here? Did you find anything?" "I have the right to be in any non-private area of this world," Tony first made a sarcastic remark to the SWORD agent, then explained, "What fell down was a hammer. This hammer is dangerous, it can control the mind of its wielder. I suggest that if you're going to take it, you should use mechanical transport and keep people away. Thank you for your advice." Tony, Coulson nodded gratefully, then gave the order, "Take it back to SHIELD, Director Coulson. This place is already under SWORD control." SWOR agents quickly stopped the SHIELD personnel. For a moment, the situation was tense again. "Sorry, Kamar Taj wants this hammer," Tony declared, no more pretense. He was laying his cards on the table. He wasn't just a playboy, a billionaire, an Iron Man, he was also a sorcerer. A sorcerer who was a candidate for the next Sorcerer Supreme of Kamar Taj. Golden magical sparks flashed, and a signature Kamar Taj portal opened. Tony had Jarvis control the arm of his suit, directly through the portal, and take the hammer back to the Sanctum Sanctorum in New York. The SWOR agents tried to stop him, but were stopped by their superiors. Power is authority. And the wielder of the most powerful force on Earth was the Sorcerer Russell of Kamar Taj. Chapter 160 Thor's Crisis, the Observer reappears. After Tony left, the SWORD commander's eyes flickered. He had overheard Tony and Coulson's conversation. This hammer could control minds, making it extremely dangerous. But along with the danger, extraordinary objects often meant immense power. This was precisely what nations desperately needed. According to SWORD's outer space monitoring data, a total of 7 hammers had fallen to Earth. Tony Stark had taken 1, leaving 6. The SWORD commander immediately withdrew his team and reported the news. They needed to exploit the time difference to try and acquire as many of the remaining 6 hammers as possible. Compared to SWORD, SHIELD didn't have as much focus. After reporting the intelligence to the World Security Council, they withdrew their team. After all, SHIELD was already marginalized and on the verge of disbanding. New York Sanctum Sanctorum. Tony looked at the hammer on the ground, a flicker of fear crossing his eyes. After some time, he successfully deciphered the characteristics of the green energy in the mental world: fear. An indescribable, irrational, mind-numbing fear. Once the mind is warped by this power of fear, one becomes a messenger of fear, wreaking havoc and spreading terror. Tony knew very well the destructive power he could unleash. Using a combination of portal magic, satellite monitoring equipment, and the AI Jarvis, he could easily teleport meteorites from outer space to near Earth's atmosphere from Earth 404. Without the obstruction of the atmosphere, the loss of mass due to burning within the atmosphere, and the loss of speed due to air resistance, the destructive power of these meteorites would be comparable to a nuclear bomb. By surprise, he possessed the ability to destroy major megacities on Earth in a short time, thus triggering World War III. After a moment's hesitation, Tony had Jarvis control the suit to pick up the hammers, reopen the portal, and head to Kamar Taj. It was safer to leave such dangerous magical artifacts than Kamar Taj. There, the Ancient One and numerous other sorcerers guarded them. When the seven hammers swept through the universe and descended upon Earth from outer space, not only were they detected by monitoring equipment in various countries on Earth, but Heimdall, the guardian of Asgard, also saw them. And Odin, the Allfather, and Frigga, the queen of the gods, also sensed something. In the grand, golden palace, Odin, clad in golden armor, gazed down. This was his daily routine as a near-retirement god king, also known as daydreaming. Behind Odin, Frigga gracefully approached, standing beside him, and together they looked down at the peaceful and prosperous landscape of Asgard. Odin, I saw a terrible scene. Our son, Thor, died in battle on Midgard. Hearing Frigga's worried words, Odin frowned. Even before Frigga arrived, he had a premonition of something ominous. And Frigga's words undoubtedly confirmed his premonition. Suppressing the unease in his heart, Odin asked, "Did you see what the enemy looked like?" "I only saw, where Thor fell, a gigantic serpent stretching like a mountain range." "A serpent?" Odin's confusion deepened. "King of the gods, queen of the gods," another voice interrupted Odin's thoughts. "Heimdall. Heimdall, have you noticed anything unusual about Midgard lately?" Odin asked. "That's why I have come, king of the gods," Heimdall replied. 7 hammers have suddenly appeared in outer space above Midgard, bearing the aura of Asgardian gods. But strangely, I've never sensed this aura anywhere else, the aura of Asgardian gods, yet Heimdall had never seen it before. Odin pondered, then a sudden thought struck him. The owner of the divine aura on these 7 hammers might very well be another Asgardian god from the multiverse. And what Frigga saw might not be a glimpse of the future, but rather an event happening in another universe. Thinking this, Odin had Frigga project the scene of Thor's death that she had witnessed. After careful comparison, the Thor in the projection did indeed differ somewhat from their son Thor. "Odin, although this happened in another universe, I fear that if we are not vigilant, it could also happen in this universe." Odin nodded and led Frigga to the Rainbow Bridge, then across to Midgard. They were going to personally warn Thor. At a manor outside New York, a 7-colored rainbow descended from the sky. As the light faded, Odin and Frigga emerged. Thor and Loki, having been informed by Heimdall, were already waiting there. After exchanging greetings, Odin told Tony about his and Frigga's discovery and asked Thor's opinion: stay on Earth to prepare for the possible appearance of the giant serpent, or return to Asgard to avoid its brunt. Thor's choice was naturally the former. As the god of thunder of Asgard, the future king, he was never afraid of battle. Odin and Frigga had already guessed this. After reminding Thor and Loki to be cautious again, Odin hurriedly departed. Besides warning Thor, he also wanted to ask the Ancient One some questions about the multiverse. Backed by Vishanti, the Ancient One knew more about it than he did. Frigga stayed behind to catch up with her 2 sons and visit her eldest son's girlfriend, Jane Foster. "Thor, does your father dislike me?" Jane Foster asked. Odin hadn't even given her a second glance since they came out of the Rainbow Bridge. Father just," Thor was about to explain when Loki interrupted him. Incidentally, Loki sarcastically remarked to Odin, "Yes. He's always like that, he's a stubborn old man. He likes to stick to the rules and is very concerned about his status. He doesn't like you, not because you're not good enough, but because you're not Asgardian. However, I quite like you, Jane." Faced with Loki's overtures, Jane Foster smiled and made a small joke with him. "Thank you, Loki. But you'd better just like me, not fall in love with me, Jane. Don't worry about it, we all support you and Thor," Frigga comforted him gently. After Odin left, the 4 of them began to feel at home. Nepal, Kamartaj. Emerging from the portal, Odin suddenly sensed someone spying on him. Following his senses, he saw a large-headed doll, the Observer. "You cold-blooded, inexperienced giant baby, always enjoying watching others make fools of themselves without a word. Is it your cold curiosity that led you to watch me make a fool of myself?" Seeing the Observer, Odin's already bad mood worsened, and he immediately launched into a tirade. This large-headed doll never bring good news. The large-headed doll simply watched quietly, showing no reaction to Odin's outburst. He was the Observer, not the interferer. Chapter 161. This is the difference. "Odin, please," the Ancient One suppressed a smile as she poured Odin a cup of tea. If she weren't minding her image, she would have scolded that big-headed doll. He claimed to be merely observing and not interfering, but in reality, he interfered quite a bit, hypocritically. After another tirade against the Observer, Odin took the tea that the Ancient One had pushed towards him and drank it all in one gulp. "Ancient One, I have come to Kamartaj to inquire whether the 7 hammers that landed in Midgard originated from Asgard in another universe. And what is the relationship between their owner and Asgard? The Ancient One sipped her tea, pondered for a moment, and then said, these 7 hammers do indeed come from another universe. Their owner is the god of terror, the serpent Kerbolson. In some universes, Kerbolson is the eldest son of King Battle, the Allfather, the king of Asgard, the Allfather, the king of Asgard. Upon hearing these 2 titles, Odin nodded solemnly. He knew well how powerful he had been in his youth. Therefore, the serpent, as the father of the other universe's gods and the king of Asgard, must naturally be equally powerful. King Odin, don't worry, the Ancient One comforted the grave-faced Odin with a smile. Have faith in the abilities of your successors. Odin shook his head helplessly. Thor and Loki were no problem against ordinary opponents. But against a father of the gods, the king of Asgard, they were far inferior. However, his current body could hardly support him in a high-intensity battle anymore. With a heavy heart, Odin returned to Asgard alone. After much deliberation, he made a difficult decision. At a manor outside New York, another rainbow descended from the sky. Accompanying the rainbow was Odin's divine message. Loki Odinson, my second son. In the name of the king of gods, I bestow upon you the sacred spear Gungnir. The rainbow light dissipated, and another runic mark appeared in the courtyard. At the center of the rune, the eternal spear Gungnir stood upright and floated. It was Odin's exclusive weapon. Holding it allowed one to borrow a portion of Odin's power. Furthermore, the spear possessed the characteristic of never missing its mark and piercing through everything, possessing astonishing destructive power. Loki's hands trembled as he received the spear Gungnir. He had long coveted his brother Thor's hammer Mjolnir, but it wasn't merely envy of Mjolnir's incredible destructive power. More importantly, it was the favoritism hidden behind it, stemming from Odin. And the spear Gungnir was Odin's exclusive weapon. Odin had never entrusted it to anyone else, not even Thor. This was the reason for Loki's intense emotion. Loki, do you swear to fight for your parents and friends? Odin's voice rang out after Loki received Gungnir. I swear. Loki's suppressed excitement turned solemn. Loki, do you swear to fight for Asgard, to defend peace? I swear. Do you swear to abandon all selfish ambitions and do only what is beneficial to the kingdom? I swear. As the last question was asked, Gungnir, the spear of eternity, shone brightly in Loki's hands. The Asgardian armor on Loki's body involuntarily appeared, covering his original black suit. Compared to Odin's solemnity, the Ancient One was much calmer. Odin still needed to pave the way for his 2 sons, Thor and Loki. The Ancient One could already rely on her disciple Russell. Ah, that's the difference. Magical sparks flickered. And a portal opened. The Ancient One teleported Russell, who had been holed up in a bookstore reading, to the Ancient One's side. Russell, still reading, after glancing at the dark tome, the Ancient One looked away. She knew that for other sorcerers, the dark tome was taboo. Casting the dark magic mentioned above comes at a huge cost. But for Russell, who is on the same level as Sithin but lacks a bit more experience, the only difference between the dark tome and other spellbooks is that the dark tome is more accessible. The words and runes on the dark tome are the information itself, which can be directly received, as long as one is not afraid of having one's mind corrupted. Russell put away the dark tome, stretched, and asked, Sorcerer, is there something you need? An Asgardian god king from another universe, the god of fear, Kerbolson, has extended his reach to Earth in this universe. Keep an eye on him when you have time, and don't let him cause too much trouble, the Ancient One said calmly. All right, Russell nodded. Is it the 7 hammers that landed on Earth before? Russell had also noticed the energy fluctuations when the 7 hammers landed on Earth from outer space, but he had ignored them. Energy fluctuations of this level were definitely not good. It should be related to those 7 hammers. The Ancient One took out the hammer Tony had brought to Kamartaj and placed it on the ground. This is one of them, take a look. Russell examined it closely. The hammer emanated a power called fear. It was clearly related to the god of fear. This hammer indeed contains the power of fear. Sorcerer, what do you think we should do? Should we collect all 7 hammers, or? Russell asked. No rush, Russell, you observe and see. As for these hammers, they will soon find their suitable owners and appear. Then, let Tony, Wanda, and the Avengers handle them. Russell nodded. The Ancient One's words were exactly what he had in mind. He was only responsible for handling things in crucial moments. Other tasks, of course, had to be outsourced. Otherwise, what was the point of him painstakingly assembling the Sorcerer Supreme? Then, Sorcerer, I'll go now. Leaving Camartage, Russell planned to go to the beverage shop next to the bookstore to inform Wanda. However, Wanda's parents told him that Wanda was still in class. The tutor who had taken leave for her was back. Reluctantly, Russell had to go find Tony first. However, Tony's whereabouts weren't as predictable as Wanda's. He needed to make a phone call first. After the call connected, Russell followed the coordinates Tony gave him, teleporting directly to the location. On the other side of the portal was the living room of Tony's newly built mansion in the suburbs of New York. There were sofas arranged around the perimeter, a warm fireplace, soft carpets, and stylish floor lamps. Although Russell didn't understand the deeper meaning behind the layout, it immediately gave off a comfortable and cozy feeling. Inside the living room, Tony was sitting with Pepper, listening to her report on the company's various business reports. However, judging from Tony's expression, he clearly wasn't interested in this. He only sat there obediently because he couldn't resist Pepper's insistence. "Russell, you're here. I heard you had something important to discuss with me. Let's go upstairs to talk." Chapter 162 Bucky Steve is attacked. "Something important?" Russell asked, puzzled. But after glancing at Tony's relieved expression and Pepper's helpless yet amused look, he instantly understood. Tony was using him as a shield. As a good friend, Russell naturally said, "No, it's nothing at all, Tony, you go ahead with your work. I'll have a drink first." Russell walked to the shop window, casually picked out a non-alcoholic beverage, and started drinking. Tony Stark, a billionaire. The drinks at his house were guaranteed to be of high quality. However, although Russell said it wasn't important, Pepper let Tony off the hook after this interruption. Pepper got up to make coffee for Tony and casually asked Russell if he wanted one too. Russell declined. He didn't like coffee. So, he ordered a hot cocoa to take back to Gwen later. It was Gwen's favorite drink. "Russell, is something wrong? Is it about that hammer?" Tony sat down at a spot not too far from Russell. "Yes, Jarvis, tell Russell." Seeing Russell nod, Tony asked Jarvis to explain the intelligence he had gathered to Russell. "The data comes from the databases of SHIELD, the FBI, the CIA, and the newly formed SWORD. There are 7 such hammers. Including the hammer Mr. Stark took, 4 hammers are now under control. The remaining 3 hammers, 1 fell into the depths of the Pacific Ocean, 1 fell into Africa, and 1 fell into Paris, France." Stop. "Tony, I didn't come here to talk about this," Russell quickly interrupted. He wasn't here to care where these hammers had fallen. Tony gave him a questioning look. Facing Tony's questioning look, Russell explained, "Tony, I just came to remind you to be careful. Once these hammers select a suitable recipient, they will grant that recipient considerable power. Also, if you need help, you can go to Thor and Loki. They should be happy to help." "Russell, aren't you going to do anything about this?" Tony asked. The safety hazards of these hammers were obvious. "Tony, everyone has their role. I need to deal with other enemies you can't handle." Russell didn't say the last part aloud, but Tony understood. "Besides, others might not welcome my involvement," Russell shrugged, bluntly stating, "other countries won't relinquish their sovereignty. If I interfere too much, I'll only be seen as meddling. Rushing things won't make a sale. You have to wait for the right opportunity, you can't force it." Although Russell could be considered a citizen of his homeland on Earth, or even in the universe, he had no intention of ruling, nor did he want to do anything unnecessary. He just wanted peace and quiet. Anyway, as long as Earth didn't explode, it was a minor matter. If Earth did explode, he could simply use time magic to reverse time and restore it, no big deal. Tony realized this too, nodded, and said nothing more. He just frowned, pondering how to achieve perfection and minimize the damage. This excessive sense of responsibility stemmed from Tony's confidence, even arrogance, a major characteristic of Iron Man. A moment later, Pepper Potts came over with coffee and hot cocoa. Seeing Tony's furrowed brow, she knew that Russell's visit was definitely not good news. It wasn't until Pepper placed a coffee in front of him that Tony reacted, quickly composing himself. Seeing this, Pepper said helplessly, "I know, you must have run into some trouble again. You don't need to hide it from me, Tony." "No, it's nothing." Tony's first reaction was to be defiant, but seeing the dangerous glint in Pepper's eyes, he changed his tune. "Okay, there is a little trouble, but only a little. And I'm definitely not in any danger. You know, I'm super strong right now." Just then, Jarvis's voice rang out again. "Sir, an urgent message from Avengers Commander Maria Hill. Open it, open it. Bucky and Steve are under attack, requesting backup. Coordinates, XXX, XXX. Upon seeing the message, Tony's expression changed. He quickly summoned his suit, donned it, and opened a portal to provide support. Maria Hill, after dealing with Hydra recently, resigned from the marginalized and severely weakened SHIELD. Now, she is employed by Tony as the commander of the Avengers. The Avengers have also separated from SHIELD and are now under Tony's command. In a sense, the Avengers are now a subordinate organization of Kamartaj. Therefore, the Avengers roster has also changed. Blade Eric left, and Quicksilver Pietro joined. Watching Tony rush off without even having time to drink a sip of coffee, Pepper sighed. Compared to the playboy of the past, she preferred the compassionate and responsible Tony of today. But if he expressed his compassion and responsibility not by fighting in his Iron Man suit, that would be even better. "Russell, aren't you going?" Seeing Russell still sitting there, sipping his drink, Pepper Potts was puzzled. "This is their Avengers business, it has nothing to do with me." "Russell, aren't you an Avenger?" Pepper was even more confused. She had always assumed Russell was a member of the Avengers. After all, Russell often acted alongside them. "No, I'm not an Avenger," Russell smiled. "I'm a god." Shortly after Tony emerged from the portal, Pietro arrived. Maria Hill had only notified the two of them. Only they possessed the portal magic, enabling them to provide rapid support. What Tony and Pietro saw was Bucky, his metal left arm torn off, his chest pierced, and lifeless. Steve Rogers lay unconscious nearby, covered in blood. His iconic vibranium shield was discarded to the side. "What happened, Mr. Stark? Did you find anything?" Pietro asked. He hoped that Tony, who had arrived earlier and had the help of the AI Jarvis analyzing the situation, could find some clues. Tony remained silent and shook his head. Although he and Bucky had some unpleasant past, it was all in the past. And Steve hadn't left the Avengers yet, he was still his comrade. Seeing one dead and the other seriously injured, he was also very upset. "Let's take them back first. Steve needs treatment," Tony gestured to Pietro, and they each carried one of them back to the base. Afterward, they would return to the battlefield through a portal to search the vicinity and see if they could find the killer. However, after searching for a long time, they ultimately found nothing. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163 Fear Spreads. Avengers Tower, on the outskirts of New York. After a fruitless search, Tony and Pietro returned to base. At this time, Black Widow Natasha, Hawkeye Barton, and Dr. Banner also arrived after hearing the news. Steve was attacked? What happened? Who's the killer? Faced with Natasha's three questions, Hill shook her head. "I don't know." After receiving Steve's distress signal, I immediately confirmed the coordinates and forwarded them to Tony and Pietro. But it seems I was still a step too late. "Tony, Pietro, have you found any clues?" Tony revealed his findings. "When I got there, Sergeant Barnes had already lost vital signs, Steve was seriously injured and unconscious, and the killer had already left. After examining the scene, no traces of firearms were found. There were also no footprints on the ground indicating the killer's departure. I suspect they left by air. Furthermore, Sergeant Barnes and Steve still possess magical power. This magical power is extremely similar to the power of the 7 Warhammers that recently arrived on Earth from outer space," Pietro added. "Me too." Hearing Tony's words, the others frowned. Now, 4 of the 7 Warhammers have been brought under control, leaving only 3 missing. It seems that at least one of those 3 hammers has found its owner, but why would the owner of the hammer attack Steve and Sergeant Barnes? Natasha asked, puzzled. "No, it's not necessarily the missing Warhammer. I heard the military also obtained a Warhammer. Given the military's style, they will definitely covet its power and study it." Dr. Banner offered another perspective. This was based on his own experience. "Let's question Steve when he wakes up. Everyone, be careful and keep your movements concealed these days. I have a feeling this person is targeting us Avengers." Hill sighed deeply. The enemy was in the shadows, while they were in the open. The situation was extremely unfavorable for the Avengers. She didn't want anyone else to die in the attack. Deep in the Pacific Ocean, beneath the sea, lay a nation, Talokan. The king of Talokan was named Namor Mackenzie. He was a descendant of the 16th century Central American Maya. Due to persecution by Spanish colonists, the villagers consumed vibranium-influenced herbs, evolving into underwater humans. Namor, however, was affected by the herbs in his mother's womb from a young age, evolving into a mutant capable of living on land and sea, and even flying. Today, his rule was challenged. Namor's right-hand man, Artuma, suddenly launched a rebellion. Artuma had found a giant serpent's hammer at the bottom of the sea. Namor, who had always possessed a significant advantage in all aspects of physical abilities, was easily defeated by Artuma in the battle, nearly dying. Namor escaped only thanks to the desperate protection of his guards and the people. But Talokan, too, was reduced to bloodbath under Artuma's hammer. Namor decides to seek help from his good friend T'Challa to reclaim Talokan. Coincidentally, Wakanda in northeastern Africa faces a similar situation. Wakanda, ostensibly a poor and backward agricultural nation, is actually the most technologically advanced country on Earth, possessing the unique and rare resource vibranium. Using vibranium, Wakanda has developed technology 50 years ahead of the world and cultivated a heart-shaped plant similar to super soldier serum. The ruler of Wakanda is known as the Black Panther. The current Black Panther is named T'Chaka. The Black Panther's successor is T'Chaka's son, T'Challa. Years ago, after T'Chaka exposed his brother Nicholas's rebellion, Nicholas, enraged, attacked T'Chaka. In self-defense, T'Chaka accidentally killed Nicholas. Nicholas's son, Eric Killmonger, was left orphaned and lost. Now, Eric Killmonger, wielding a strange warhammer, has returned to Wakanda. He is invincible, unmatched by any who strike his hammer. Slaughter and fear engulfed Wakanda. King T'Chaka chose to perish with his kingdom, dying on the spot. His successor, T'Challa, was severely wounded and taken away by his sister, Shuri. After awakening, T'Challa decided to seek the help of his friend Namor to reclaim Wakanda. The events in Talokan deep in the Pacific Ocean and in Wakanda in northeastern Africa remained unknown. However, news of the events in Paris, France, spread across the globe in a very short time. A mysterious figure raised a hammer that fell from the sky, turning many Parisian citizens into statues. An atmosphere of fear began to spread from Paris and was about to engulf the entire country. Just then, another man wielding a warhammer, accompanied by thunder and lightning, descended from the sky. The newcomer had lion-like blonde hair, wore silver armor, and was incredibly powerful. It was Thor. "Who are you? Why are you slaughtering these innocent citizens?" As soon as he landed, Thor raised Mjolnir and angrily rebuked the mysterious man wielding the giant hammer. The mysterious man didn't speak, but simply swung the hammer at Thor. Thor didn't waste any words either, swinging Mjolnir to meet it. Compared to the giant hammer in the mysterious man's hand, Thor's Mjolnir seemed rather small. But the result of their collision was completely opposite to their size. Boom! With a deafening roar, the shock waves spread wildly in all directions, destroying buildings in the nearby blocks. But even faster than the shockwave was the mysterious man's figure flying backward. With just one hammer blow, the difference in strength was immediately apparent. The mysterious man's strength was completely incomparable to Thor's. "Thor, are you Thor, the god of thunder?" the mysterious man finally spoke. "I've heard of you, Thor, the god of thunder. I've heard that you once shattered a dimensional barrier with 3 hammer blows." Thor looked at the mysterious man before him, waiting for him to continue. "You and another man named Russell, you terrified us back then. However, now that I possess the power of the great god of fear, the serpent father of all gods, I fear no one," the mysterious man roared, swinging his giant hammer again at Thor. Thor, unfazed, swung Mjolnir to meet the attack. Just as the two hammers were about to collide, a gray energy wave suddenly shot out from the mysterious man's hammer, striking the unsuspecting Thor. Although caught off guard, Thor reacted quickly, switching from offense to defense and using Mjolnir to block the energy wave. The energy wave struck Mjolnir but was deflected without any effect. The wave turned some fearless, curious onlookers into stone statues. A commotion erupted in the crowd again. "I'll ask you one more time, who are you?" Thor lunged forward, his Mjolnir crackling with lightning. A downward swing sent the mysterious man flying through the air. Boom! A bolt of silver lightning descended from the sky, striking the mysterious man. Some readers have reported that Thor and Tony are often confused. Therefore, from now on, Thor will be referred to as Thor. Chapter 164 Thor and Loki beat up Thanos Jr. Steve, are you sure it was Emil Blonsky who attacked you and Sergeant Barnes in Avengers Tower? The group was incredulous at the news. Most of them had assumed it was the wielder of one of the 3 lost Warhammers who had attacked Steve and his companions. I'm sure. What about Bucky? What happened to him? Looking at his empty bed in the medical room, Steve seemed to remember something and asked, his voice trembling. Steve, please accept my condolences. Tony's comforting words silenced the room. Steve gestured for him to be alone. The group left the medical room and went to the conference room. Even after taking their seats, their expressions remained grave. If something had happened to the Warhammer held by the American military, then the other 3 might also be in danger. Natasha couldn't help but ask first, Tony, where's the Warhammer you got? Is it safe? I entrusted it to the Ancient One for safekeeping. It's unlikely to be harmed. Thor and Loki should be able to get their hands on it in Paris, France. The most important thing now is to find the 2 Warhammers that haven't appeared yet in the Pacific and Africa, Tony said in a deep voice. Magical sparks flickered as Loki and Thor emerged from the portal. I'm sorry, the mysterious man in Paris escaped. A traitor from Kamar-Taj is meeting him. Tony remained silent. Loki continued, we just came from Kamar-Taj. Kamar-Taj's magic array detected unusual magical energy in 2 locations, the depths of the Pacific and northeastern Africa. The other 2 Warhammers have already appeared. However, Thor and I were too late when we got there, so, what should we do now, Loki? Hill asked. Stop the spread of fear. The underwater kingdom of Talokan and the African kingdom of Wakanda have been conquered, and fear has spread across the ocean and Africa. Now, we need to find a way to stop fear from spreading from Paris to the world, Loki replied. What will happen if fear spreads? Hill continued. The god of fear from other universes will descend upon this earth. Furthermore, absorbing this energy of fear would rapidly increase his strength. Let's act, our time is running out. Several days passed in a flash. Although Hill reported the news to the World Security Council, and various countries tried to control public opinion, the results were minimal. The Western world saw little success. After all, freedom of speech prevails. After several days of fermentation, the energy of fear on Earth was sufficient for the serpent to quickly recover to its peak state after crossing over. Therefore, the ritual to summon the serpent was put on the agenda. Manhattan, New York. Cassilis gathered 4 Hammer Apostles. They were the Super Skrull Gravik, Abomination, Emil Blonsky, Artuma, and the Leopard Eric Killmonger. There were still 3 hammers left, untouched, but Cassilis couldn't wait any longer. Let's summon our god with a massacre. Cassilis ordered the 4 Serpent Apostles to go out and wreak havoc, creating fear. He, along with other mages, would conduct the summoning ritual. Thus, New York, which had just been rebuilt, suffered another devastating blow. 4 giant Serpent Apostles wielding Warhammers wreaked havoc in Manhattan, the most densely populated of New York's 5 boroughs and its financial center. The NYPD mobilized immediately upon the Apostles' onslaught. However, aside from using high-powered missiles to clear the area, the NYPD was helpless against the 4 Apostles. The Avengers were the second to react. Their headquarters were located in the suburbs of New York. Furthermore, Gwen's street hero team arrived to provide support. The Avengers' strength was a perfect match for the 4 Serpent Apostles. As if by fate, Hulk faced Emil Blonsky. It's you, Hulk, Blonsky grinned, swinging his giant hammer at Hulk. Hulk roared and grabbed the car, smashing it down. Hey, don't smash cars like that, the police will yell at you. Gwen's Spider-Man, who had just arrived, couldn't help but complain at Hulk's brutal actions. Hulk, don't be afraid. Tony, pay up, Hulk responded to Gwen in a gruff voice, then wrestled with Blonsky. You guys help evacuate and rescue civilians, don't get too close. Gwen instructed her team members not to interfere in the main battle, but to flank from the side. Street heroes are not all the same. After being enhanced multiple times by Russell, Gwen's physical abilities had reached a terrifying level. But her teammates were only strong compared to ordinary people. Compared to true superhumans, they were not enough. On the other side, Hill was also giving the Avengers instructions. Barton, Natasha, Pietro, you 3 will provide flank support. Pietro, you're fast, also help rescue the injured. Tony, Thor, Loki, you each hold off one hammer wielder. Thor still chose to face Gravik. He was still resentful that Gravik had escaped last time. Tony faced Eric Killmonger. Tony didn't know that in some universe, Tony had been betrayed by Eric Killmonger and was still counting the money for him. Loki faced Artuma. From the very first exchange, all three gained varying degrees of advantage. Seeing this, Hill in the command center breathed a sigh of relief. Although the team was small, each member was an elite among elites. We summon you, God of Terror, Father of the Gods, King of Asgard, hear the summons, come to our side. While the battle raged outside, inside the secret chamber, Caecilius led the other mages in a focused and devout summoning ritual. In a mysterious space, the giant serpent suddenly opened its eyes. Mephisto was indeed a trustworthy man. With a sigh, the serpent obeyed the apostle's summons and cast its gaze in that direction. Fear. A chilling fear permeated the air. Not only nearby, but the entire planet was filled with an aura of terror. Having made up its mind, the serpent emerged from the mysterious space and descended upon Earth 404. In the Manhattan sky, a green vortex first appeared. Then, a giant serpent slowly swam out of the vortex. The colossal serpent coiled high in the sky, blotting out the sun. Seeing this, the citizens of New York grew even more terrified, lowering their heads, unable to look at the giant serpent in the sky any longer. Thus, no one saw the giant serpent's eyes gradually filled with doubt. Where is my fear energy? Where is my fear energy that permeates the entire planet? How did it suddenly disappear? Chapter 165 The Great Serpent Descends. Where's my fear energy? Russell naturally accepted the serpent's fear energy. No, Earth 404 was Russell's territory. This fear energy originally belonged to him. As one of the poorest ancient gods, or perhaps one of, Russell fully demonstrated a virtue of conserving energy. Seeing the fish take the bait, he immediately retrieved the bait. On the ground, the battle between superheroes and villains continued. As the summoning ritual ended, Caecilius and his mages joined the battlefield. The New York Police Department and the military, originally responsible for evacuating the public and maintaining order, encountered a sudden attack. Golden magical sparks flashed, and portals silently opened. Then, mages wielding energy blades suddenly rushed out, hacking and slashing at the crowd. These mages were covered in energy shields, rendering ordinary firearms ineffective against them. Combined with the portals, they appeared and disappeared unpredictably. In an instant, the police and military suffered heavy losses. Barton, on the top floor, was fully focused, drawing his longbow and ready for battle. He discovered a flaw in the portal spell, the casting animation. The portal required time to open and close, and that time was his opportunity. Seizing the chance, Barton unleashed a triple-shot barrage. 3 arrows struck the same spot in succession, piercing the mage's energy shield and killing him. However, Barton was outnumbered. Fortunately, Wanda, Gaia, and the mages stationed at the New York Sanctum of Kamartaj joined the fray in time. The situation on the battlefield shifted once again. Wanda showed no mercy to these traitorous mages. Streams of crimson energy shot out, incredibly fast and precisely targeting their targets. The Kamartaj traitors had no time to react or dodge, forced to rely on their shields to withstand the damage. But the power of chaos magic was not so easily countered. Caught off guard, the Kamartaj traitors suffered heavy casualties. Well done, Wanda. Barton and Natasha, who were also watching, couldn't help but praise her. Wanda's outstanding performance earned praise from her teammates and also attracted the attention of Caecilius. Crack. Crack, the space around Wanda distorted and collapsed, a building crashing down towards her. Wanda quickly ran to the side, trying to avoid the falling building, but found that no matter how she ran, she remained in the same place. Frustrated, Wanda could only unleash an energy projectile with one hand, shattering the building, and with the other, erect an energy shield to withstand the impact of the debris. Caecilius, wielding the Hammer of Winter, hit on a boulder, intending to fall with the debris and ambush Wanda. Wanda, however, was completely unaware of this. Wanda, watch out, Jia Yan, seeing Caecilius's scheme, shot a crimson energy towards the boulder, shattering it and revealing Caecilius. Seeing this, Wanda reacted, quickly putting her hands together to erect a large energy shield. However, against the Hammer of Winter, the hastily erected energy shield was useless. Caecilius's hammer, falling from the sky, slammed into Wanda's energy shield, shattering it instantly. In that critical moment, time seemed to freeze. A surge of shimmering white energy erupted behind Wanda, engulfing her. If that hammer had landed squarely, Wanda would likely have been obliterated. Russell wouldn't allow his candidate for the Sorcerer Supreme to die like that. A moment later, Caecilius's hammer missed its target and crashed to the ground. Boom! The immense force released into the earth created a shockwave. The entire block seemed to sink a third, shattering glass fixtures and surrounding high-rise buildings. Young Wanda was clearly struggling against Caecilius. Even with Gaia's support, she was no match. Fortunately, they had Russell's backing, giving them some leeway. Hill, commanding from the base, noticed a battle between Wanda and Caecilius and immediately notified Pietro for backup. When Pietro arrived, the three of them combined their strength and managed to hold off Caecilius. The entire battle was divided into 5 parts, all temporarily deadlocked. The first to emerge victorious was Hulk and Bronski. Although Bronski was enhanced after wielding the giant snake's hammer, he was still just an ordinary super soldier. The enhanced serum he received was probably less effective than Steve's. Under the combined attack of Hulk and Spider-Gwen, Bronski quickly succumbed, and his hammer was seized by Spider-Gwen. Bang! Hulk kicked the hammerless Bronski, sending him flying through several walls. Hulk, invincible, Hulk exclaimed excitedly, smashing 2 more cars in the process. Hey, big guy. Let's go help the others first, Spider-Gwen suggested. Just then, Hill in the command center connected to the nearby street's public address system, giving Hulk and Gwen new instructions. Hulk, Spider-Man, 2 blocks east, Wanda and Pietro need your help. Although the 3 of them were working together, Wanda was still struggling against Caecilius. Therefore, upon seeing Hulk and Gwen defeat their opponents, Hill immediately ordered them to provide support. Okay, hearing that Wanda needed help, Gwen quickly shot out a web and swung in the direction Hill indicated. Hulk scratched his head, then quickly followed. The second to be decided was Thor and the Super Skrull Gravik. The key factor that allowed Thor to quickly turn his advantage into victory was the destroyer armor that descended from the sky. In Asgard, Odin and Frigga had been watching their 2 sons closely. After the appearance of the giant serpent, their ominous premonitions grew stronger. Therefore, Odin provided Thor with an assist by sending him his other signature weapon, the destroyer armor. Wearing the destroyer armor, Thor's defense and offense were further enhanced. Finding an opportunity, Thor knocked Gravik into the air. The next moment, the destroyer armor fired beams of destruction from its eyes, hitting Gravik in mid-air and instantly obliterating him. Little Thanos, after all, was just little Thanos. Watching his 2 subordinates fall, the giant serpent remained unmoved. To him, as long as the hammer remained, he could have as many tools as he wanted. A flash of green light, and the serpent transformed from its serpentine head into human form. Leaning on its battle axe, hunched over, and looking somewhat aged, the serpent smiled at Thor below. Thor, my good nephew, we meet again. Thor showed no respect, angrily retorting, I don't have an uncle like you. If you want to curry favor, go back to your universe. Just then, from outside the universe, the big-headed dolls once again cast their gaze upon him. The serpent glanced at them and then looked away. He knew that these big-headed dolls, known as observers, rarely interfered with events within the universe. Russell, however, gave the big-headed dolls a meaningful smile. You like watching the show, huh? I'll come find you and charge you later. Chapter 166 Changes in the battle situation. Russell naturally accepted the serpent's fear energy. No, Earth 404 was Russell's territory. This fear energy originally belonged to him. As one of the poorest ancient gods, or perhaps one of, Russell fully demonstrated a virtue of conserving energy. Seeing the fish take the bait, he immediately retrieved the bait. On the ground, the battle between superheroes and villains continued. As the summoning ritual ended, Caecilius and his mages joined the battlefield. The New York Police Department and the military, originally responsible for evacuating the public and maintaining order, encountered a sudden attack. Golden magical sparks flashed, and portals silently opened. Then, mages wielding energy blades suddenly rushed out, hacking and slashing at the crowd. These mages were covered in energy shields, rendering ordinary firearms ineffective against them. Combined with the portals, they appeared and disappeared unpredictably. In an instant, the police and military suffered heavy losses. Barton, on the top floor, was fully focused, drawing his longbow and ready for battle. He discovered a flaw in the portal spell, the casting animation. The portal required time to open and close, And that time was his opportunity. Seizing the chance, Barton unleashed a triple-shot barrage. 3 arrows struck the same spot in succession, piercing the mage's energy shield and killing him. However, Barton was outnumbered. Fortunately, Wanda, Gaia, and the mages stationed at the New York Sanctum of Kamartaj joined the fray in time. The situation on the battlefield shifted once again. Wanda showed no mercy to these traitorous mages. Streams of crimson energy shot out, incredibly fast and precisely targeting their targets. The Kamartaj traitors had no time to react or dodge, forced to rely on their shields to withstand the damage. But the power of chaos magic was not so easily countered. Caught off guard, the Kamartaj traitors suffered heavy casualties. Well done, Wanda. Barton and Natasha, who were also watching, couldn't help but praise her. Wanda's outstanding performance earned praise from her teammates and also attracted the attention of Caecilius. Crack. Crack, the space around Wanda distorted and collapsed, a building crashing down towards her. Wanda quickly ran to the side, trying to avoid the falling building, but found that no matter how she ran, she remained in the same place. Frustrated, Wanda could only unleash an energy projectile with one hand, shattering the building, and with the other, erect an energy shield to withstand the impact of the debris. Caecilius, wielding the hammer of winter, hit on a boulder, intending to fall with the debris and ambush Wanda. Wanda, however, was completely unaware of this. Wanda, watch out, Jia Yan, seeing Caecilius's scheme, shot a crimson energy towards the boulder, shattering it and revealing Caecilius. Seeing this, Wanda reacted, quickly putting her hands together to erect a large energy shield. However, against the hammer of winter, the hastily erected energy shield was useless. Caecilius's hammer, falling from the sky, slammed into Wanda's energy shield, shattering it instantly. In that critical moment, time seemed to freeze. A surge of shimmering white energy erupted behind Wanda, engulfing her. If that hammer had landed squarely, Wanda would likely have been obliterated. Russell wouldn't allow his candidate for the Sorcerer Supreme to die like that. A moment later, Caecilius's hammer missed its target and crashed to the ground. Boom! The immense force released into the earth created a shockwave. The entire block seemed to sink a third, shattering glass fixtures and surrounding high-rise buildings. Young Wanda was clearly struggling against Caecilius. Even with Gaia's support, she was no match. Fortunately, they had Russell's backing, giving them some leeway. Hill, commanding from the base, noticed a battle between Wanda and Caecilius and immediately notified Pietro for backup. When Pietro arrived, the three of them combined their strength and managed to hold off Caecilius. The entire battle was divided into 5 parts, all temporarily deadlocked. The first to emerge victorious was Hulk and Bronski. Although Bronski was enhanced after wielding the giant snake's hammer, he was still just an ordinary super soldier. The enhanced serum he received was probably less effective than Steve's. Under the combined attack of Hulk and Spider-Gwen, Bronski quickly succumbed, and his hammer was seized by Spider-Gwen. Bang! Hulk kicked the hammerless Bronski, sending him flying through several walls. Hulk, invincible, Hulk exclaimed excitedly, smashing 2 more cars in the process. Hey, big guy. Let's go help the others first, Spider-Gwen suggested. Just then, Hill in the command center connected to the nearby street's public address system, giving Hulk and Gwen new instructions. Hulk, Spider-Man, 2 blocks east, Wanda and Pietro need your help. Although the 3 of them were working together, Wanda was still struggling against Caecilius. Therefore, upon seeing Hulk and Gwen defeat their opponents, Hill immediately ordered them to provide support. Okay, hearing that Wanda needed help, Gwen quickly shot out a web and swung in the direction Hill indicated. Hulk scratched his head, then quickly followed. The second to be decided was Thor and the Super Skrull Gravik. The key factor that allowed Thor to quickly turn his advantage into victory was the destroyer armor that descended from the sky. In Asgard, Odin and Frigga had been watching their 2 sons closely. After the appearance of the giant serpent, their ominous premonitions grew stronger. Therefore, Odin provided Thor with an assist by sending him his other signature weapon, the destroyer armor. Wearing the destroyer armor, Thor's defense and offense were further enhanced. Finding an opportunity, Thor knocked Gravik into the air. The next moment, the destroyer armor fired beams of destruction from its eyes, hitting Gravik in mid-air and instantly obliterating him. Little Thanos, after all, was just little Thanos. Watching his 2 subordinates fall, the giant serpent remained unmoved. To him, as long as the hammer remained, He could have as many tools as he wanted. A flash of green light, and the serpent transformed from its serpentine head into human form. Leaning on its battle axe, hunched over, and looking somewhat aged, the serpent smiled at Thor below. "Thor, my good nephew, we meet again." Thor showed no respect, angrily retorting, "I don't have an uncle like you. If you want to curry favor, go back to your universe." Just then, from outside the universe, the big-headed dolls once again cast their gaze upon him. The serpent glanced at them and then looked away. He knew that these big-headed dolls, known as observers, rarely interfered with events within the universe. Russell, however, gave the big-headed dolls a meaningful smile. "You like watching the show, huh? I'll come find you and charge you later." Chapter 167 The Observer. 2 billion Russell, double. Russell wasn't worried about the battle in New York. If it were the serpent at its peak, Thor, Tony, Loki, and Wanda would have a hard time dealing with it. But this wasn't the serpent at its peak, it was a weakened serpent. The terrifying energy that was perfectly suited to the serpent, capable of restoring its strength, was completely swept away by Russell the moment the serpent descended. Therefore, after leaving an eco-shaped clone to keep a brief eye on the New York battle, Russell's true body left to chat with a big-headed doll. On the moon, in a castle in a blue area, golden magical sparks bloomed, a portal opened, and Russell stepped out. Looking at the big-headed doll standing quietly before him, watching the New York battle from an endless distance, Russell teased, "What should I call you, big-headed doll, or the spy? You know, we are the observers." The observer's voice was calm, still not looking away. "Oh, so you're warriors. I hate people who have no sense of boundaries." Russell's voice turned cold. In his opinion, this observer was being incredibly shameless. So-called observation, in essence, is no different from voyeurism. Both involve peeping into someone's secrets without their consent. It's just that these big-headed dolls hadn't been discovered before, and even after being discovered, they were confident in their strength and unafraid of trouble. That's why they've always been so arrogant, calling themselves observers. But Russell wasn't going to tolerate this hetshoe. A flash of silver light appeared, and Russell's divine power slammed into the doll's face. Caught off guard, the big-headed doll was immediately blasted away, carving a deep trench in the lunar surface. "What are you doing?" The big-headed doll stood up, glaring at Russell. "I'm teaching you how to respect people, big-headed doll. You'd better tone down your arrogant attitude, or I won't hesitate to kill you." Russell was unfazed by the big-headed doll's anger, responding forcefully. "I meant no harm. I just wanted to be a spectator, silently recording the major events happening in this universe." Faced with Russell's forceful retort, the big-headed doll seemed somewhat aggrieved. Was he really going to be attacked just because he was a spectator? Russell's answer was yes. "Who gave you the right to spy on me?" Russell unleashed his divine power, his powerful aura causing the moon's magnetic field to become disordered and the surrounding space-time to distort. The big-headed doll's castle crumbled into dust under Russell's oppressive aura. The big-headed doll also couldn't help but retreat under Russell's oppressive aura. No, I didn't mean to spy on you," the observer stammered, hurriedly denying it. Russell's power far exceeded his expectations, it could easily kill him. In his memory, Russell a few months ago, although strong, was far from posing a threat to his life. Wrong answer. Russell's voice was icy, his palm outstretched, facing the big-headed doll. Terrifying divine power condensed in Russell's palm, seemingly about to erupt at any moment. Across countless worlds, amidst endless suffering, you merely stand by indifferently. I thought you had become indifferent to life and death, joy and sorrow. It turns out, you've only become indifferent to others' suffering. Big-headed doll, look at yourself now. How wretched you are when death is imminent." Under Russell's oppressive aura, big-headed doll trembled. Cold sweat pouring down his face. At this moment, he felt the threat of death for the first time in a long time. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind, and he cried out, "I was wrong. I shouldn't have spied on you. I can compensate you." Correct answer. Russell's voice softened, his divine power vanished, and his aura subsided. The moon's magnetic field and the surrounding spacetime also returned to stability. It seemed that everything before was an illusion. Only the castle that had disappeared from the spot could prove that everything that had just happened was real. "Observer, shall we discuss a compensation agreement?" Russell said with a smile. The observer remained silent. He had been calling them a big-headed doll and a voyeur, but upon hearing about compensation, he changed his tune. 2 billion units of energy. the observer stated without hesitation. This was the amount Mephisto had initially demanded in compensation. Good, straightforward. I agree, Russell nodded in agreement. With another wave of his hand, green light flashed. Time around them reversed, and the castle that had been reduced to dust was restored to its original state. Seeing this, the observer's expression softened. With a flick of his hand, he opened a dimensional portal. Endless energy surged from the portal. Russell activated his talent, absorbing the surging energy, and then glanced at the other side through the portal. On the other side of the dimensional portal was a prism dimension. Each prism seemed to correspond to a real universe. I am not heartless. It's just that we swore an oath not to interfere with the natural laws of things. I cannot interfere. After the atmosphere eased, the observer slowly spoke, defending his actions. Yes, Russell simply nodded, not arguing. The observers were a civilization. They had sworn an oath never to interfere in events in the universe, nor in the development of any life or thing. However, many members had broken this oath. But Russell hadn't yet found any evidence that this observer had broken his oath, so there was no need to argue with him. He could wait until he found something to satirize him. After a long while, the energy channel closed. Russell's eyes became dangerous again. The observer also gradually felt uneasy. What do you want to do? Russell. I've already given you 2 billion units of energy as compensation, twice. Russell held up 2 fingers. You've spied on me twice. I shouldn't need to remind you, you big-headed doll. Once, it was now, the serpent invasion. And another time, it was when Tony was attacked by Dr. Pym, and Russell and Mephisto were scheming against each other. The big-headed doll's face turned pale, then red. He had never seen such a shameless person. But, when you're under someone's roof, you have to bow your head. The observer waved his hand again, reopening the energy channel, and endless energy surged forth once more. Seeing this, Russell activated his talent again to absorb the energy. Watching his attribute points rise steadily, his eyebrows unconsciously arched. A big spender indeed, 2 billion units of energy, without any hesitation. Such a big spender couldn't be let go. But forcing it wouldn't be good either. After all, Russell considered his alignment to be lawful good. As for why not chaotic good? Of course, it's because others have to abide by his rules. Uncharacteristically, Russell suddenly exclaimed, Observer. In the vast multiverse, countless civilizations have risen and fallen. The vast majority of them cannot leave even a trace in this universe before being completely annihilated. It is truly their fortune to have you, recording the major events that have occurred in their civilizations. It's so good to have you all in the multiverse. Chapter 168 Russell's Deal with the Observer. We existed before the multiverse. We possessed knowledge and technology billions of years ahead of other civilizations. We once believed we should be the guardians of the universe, helping other races evolve. However, through experiments, we discovered that not only individuals have lifespan limitations, but races and civilizations also have limited lifespans. Our intervention would only hasten their demise. Since then, we have ceased interfering in cosmic affairs, acting merely as observers, recording major events. The big-headed doll puffed out its chest as it spoke of the observer civilization's glory. For powerful beings like Odin, whose strength was comparable to the observers, or Russell, whose strength surpassed the observer's spying was an offense. Naturally, they felt displeased. Furthermore, while the observers spoke grandly, seemingly as absolutely objective observers, they frequently took sides. This hypocritical behavior was always despised. This is why the observers had a poor reputation among the powerful. But for countless other mediocre civilizations, the existence of the observers was a matter of opinion. As Bertrand Russell said, in the multiverse, the vast majority of civilizations are born and perish silently. For such a civilization to be recorded by one person until the end of the multiverse is perhaps an extremely romantic thing. Life always fears its nameless demise and always wants to obtain some trace of proof. But the masses are destined to disappear silently. Russell looked at Earth and waved his hand to unfold a series of screens. On the screens were the various aspects of life in different cities, towns, and villages. Among them were the elderly, middle-aged, young people, teenagers, and children of all ages. Decades of mortals, hundreds of years of nations, thousands of years of civilizations. On the scale of the multiverse, they are so insignificant. The traces they leave in this world will soon be completely wiped away by time. Only you can record them until the end of the multiverse. Observers, Your greatness needs no further explanation, Russell sighed, giving the observer a thumbs up. To extract more energy from this fat sheep, Russell didn't mind making some polite remarks. Faced with Russell's unusual praise, the observer, though puzzled, couldn't help but smile, his usually expressionless face revealing a corner of his mouth. He had now realized that Russell was a more powerful being, and praise from a superior was always more pleasing. Master Russell, you flatter me. We, the observers, are not great. Those individuals and civilizations that constantly overcome difficulties and obstacles, constantly develop and progress, proving their vitality and elevating their vitality, they are the truly great. We are merely observers, witnesses, and recorders. Russell pointed to the many superheroes in the image. They are like shooting stars streaking across the night sky, illuminating the entire firmament, but a meteor exhausts its life to illuminate the night sky for a fleeting moment. A star, however, burns eternally, illuminating the day. Master Russell, what do you mean, observer? There is a being greater than a star right before you. Why choose the distant one? Russell smiled, pointing to himself. His voice carried a powerful allure, and the enchanting spell from the dark tome began to be cast. Recording a meteor streaking across the night sky. That fleeting beauty may be romantic, but recording the rise of a supreme deity, that grandeur transcending infinite time and infinite space. That is the true legend, the true epic, the true myth. Faced with Russell's promise, dark magic, the observer's heart stirred, and he instinctively chose to believe. He remembered that although this person before him was extremely powerful, his rise was remarkably brief. Even he, the observer who had always focused on Earth 404, didn't know how or when Russell had risen to power. The rise of such a powerful deity was a rare event in the multiverse. For the observer, witnessing and recording his rise would be tantamount to proving and elevating his own vitality. Russell, I am willing to witness and record your rise, but why do I need someone to record and witness my rise? Even if I need someone to record and witness my rise, why you, and not someone else from your race? Observer, you should know that I possess the ability to freely traverse the multiverse. Finding your kind is not difficult. What advantages do you have compared to them? Russell began to manipulate the observer. After successfully creating a demand in the observer, to witness and record his rise, Russell needed to find a way to command a high price. The simplest way was to suppress the observer and elevate himself, thereby influencing his value judgments. The observer pondered for a moment. God Russell, I can give you energy in exchange for this opportunity. Other observers can also give me energy. This is just the basics, not your real advantage. Unless you don't mind witnessing this with your kin, I don't mind. To Russell's surprise, the observer didn't seem to care about exclusive interview rights. Upon reflection, Russell understood. After all, they were observers, not journalists. They didn't need to report what they recorded. The exclusive news brought by exclusive interview rights was naturally dispensable to them. However, this did inspire Russell. He could sell the same thing to multiple people, finding several observers. Then let's determine the price, the same as before, 2 billion units of energy for one major event. Okay, the observer readily agreed. For a moment, Russell wondered if he had set the price too low. Or perhaps, this fat sheep was much fatter than he had imagined. Although he regretted it somewhat, since he had already decided on the price, Russell didn't intend to change it. A dignified god like Russell couldn't leave behind such a black history of going back on his word. Unless, of course, the observer suddenly felt a chill run down his almost non-existent neck. Undoubtedly, this chill could only come from the god Russell beside him. The observer sighed inwardly. This god Russell was good in every way, and generally belonged to the righteous camp. It was just that sometimes he was too mad, too chaotic. However, this was also the reason he had made a deal with him. Chaos was a ladder. Those who were completely orderly could not reach the top. Chapter 169 The Earth War Ends. Russell finalized a deal with the observer and turned his attention back to Earth. On Earth, the battle situation shifted once more. Thor and Orchi clashed in the skies above New York after a disagreement. However, compared to the spirited Thor, Orchi seemed somewhat distracted. A problem had been troubling Orchi. The fear energy generated on Earth had mysteriously disappeared, preventing him from regaining his strength. Without resolving this issue, Orchi had no will to fight. Boy, our battle isn't today. Get out of here. A green light swept across Thor, throwing him into the air and onto the streets of Manhattan. Even at his weakest, Orchi was far stronger than Thor. No, Our battle is today. I will defeat you and defend the peace of the 9 realms." Thor staggered, then rose again, wielding Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. Although still weaker than Orochi, the destroyer armor protected him, making it much more difficult for Orochi to defeat him. "You're even more arrogant than the Thor I know, but your strength is far inferior." The serpent's power erupted once more, a beam of green energy descending from the sky towards Thor. Thor, left with no choice, raised Mjolnir to meet the attack head-on, forcefully blocking it. If he dodged, the police and military personnel on the ground who hadn't yet evacuated would suffer. The terrifying energy beam struck Mjolnir, pinning Thor down and rendering him immobile. The energy that dissipated after hitting Mjolnir confused Thor's senses. So much so that when the energy beam dissipated, Thor realized the serpent was nowhere to be found. Helpless, Thor could only go help deal with the other serpent apostles. After a brief observation, Thor noticed the fiercest battle was taking place on Loki's side, so he rushed to provide support. Throwing Mjolnir aside, Thor, disregarding all martial ethics, launched a sneak attack on Attuma, who was fighting Loki. The hammer pierced the unsuspecting Attuma's chest, instantly reducing him to ashes, vanishing like a phantom bubble. No, this Attuma was an illusion, a phantom created by Loki. The truth was, Loki had already defeated Attuma. The scene of their fierce battle was merely an illusion he created. He did this for 2 reasons: 1, to slack off, 2, to conceal himself and launch a surprise attack at a crucial moment. Elsewhere, Tony and Eric the Leopard were locked in a fierce battle. Although Tony had gained the upper hand with his superior firepower, he faced an awkward problem. Unable to use his weapon of mass destruction, the celestial meteor, he lacked a powerful, decisive strike. Suddenly, Tony's expression shifted. His suit's infrared scanner detected Loki lurking nearby. After dealing with Attuma, Loki had originally intended to ambush Thor while Thor and the serpent were locked in a fierce battle, delivering a fatal blow. But he hadn't expected the serpent to escape. Forced to retreat, Tony decided to ambush Eric the Leopard, who was fighting Loki. Upon noticing Loki's approach, Tony, in perfect coordination, created an opportunity for Loki. No longer sparing his mental energy, Tony used the combined power of his Aegon form and the crimson chains of Sitorax to create over a dozen versions of himself, using the chains to firmly bind Eric the Leopard. Eric the Leopard struggled fiercely, his warhammer surging with energy, trying to break free. But just then, a spear silently pierced his back. Swoosh, in an instant. The spear pierced through Eric the Leopard. His vibranium suit and the warhammer's reinforced muscles and bones were like tofu against the spear, offering no protection whatsoever. This was Odin's weapon, Gungnir, the eternal spear. With his heart pierced and shattered, Eric the Leopard's strength dissipated, and he collapsed to the ground, lifeless. In the final battle, with Thor arriving to provide support, Caecilius, facing a 6-man onslaught, was no longer able to resist. However, unlike the other Warhammer wielders, Caecilius was a master of escape. "I will return. The god of terror will devour this world." With these harsh words, Caecilius turned and disappeared into the portal behind him. However, upon emerging from the portal, Caecilius was shocked to find he was in the wrong place. He had been transported to Kamartaj, to the Ancient One's courtyard. "Caecilius, sit." The Ancient One gestured for Caecilius to sit. Caecilius looked at the Ancient One warily before slowly sitting down. "Please have some." The Ancient One pushed a cup of tea towards Caecilius, smiling as if he were still her disciple, not a traitor. "What do you want?" However, Caecilius was unmoved and didn't even touch the tea. "I just want to see my dying disciple one last time. You might not be able to kill me. Last time, I escaped from you. Now, I'm stronger than then, and you're even less likely to kill me. You might even be the one I kill," Caecilius said coldly. His confidence had swelled after wielding the Hammer of Winter and gaining the power of Skadi, the goddess of winter. "You'll die without me lifting a finger. I warned you that spell would make you regret it." The Ancient One remained seated, showing no intention of attacking. "No, I don't regret it. How could I regret such power? Silly child, look at your hands." The Ancient One sighed. Caecilius looked down at his palms and saw them dissipating, his energy draining away. "What's happening, Caecilius? I taught you not to trust the power bestowed by the demon god. Only the power you cultivate through hardship truly belongs to you. When you gaze into the abyss also gazes into you. If you take a small piece of flesh from the abyss will devour you entirely." "No. No," Caecilius roared, But he couldn't stop the energy from flowing away. In a short while, Cassila's life force completely drained away, leaving only a skeleton on the spot. With a gust of wind, the skeleton turned to ashes and dissipated into the world. Not only Cassilas, but the other 4 serpent messengers who raised warhammers also encountered the same situation. The demon god's gift was both a blessing and a poison. Unable to draw fear energy from the earth to recover, the serpent bit its fangs at its apostles. By absorbing the apostles' life force and the soul energy accumulated from the slaughter during this period, the serpent's condition improved slightly. From its previous frail state, it became a healthy old man who could straighten its back. In the vast emptiness of space, the giant serpent gazed at the swirling nebula ahead and the continent in the middle of it, a sinister smile curling at the corner of its mouth. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170 Battlefield Shift, Asgard attacked. Where's that evil sorcerer? Did he get away? Thor was annoyed as he watched Caecilius disappear through the portal. These mages with teleportation spells, they run away when they can't win, disgusting. Oh, I can do that too, never mind. Touching the sling ring in his pocket, Thor took back his words. Anyway, the battle is finally over. Let's go help rescue the injured civilians. Looking at the severely damaged Manhattan streets, Gwen shook her head helplessly. Fortunately, the impact this time wasn't as great as last time, otherwise she would have to cancel her classes again. Shortly after the group disengaged from the battle and separated, Heimdall's voice suddenly rang out. Thor, the serpent has invaded Asgard, come back quickly to help. Immediately afterward, a rainbow of light descended from the sky, teleporting Thor back to Asgard. The serpent has invaded Asgard, should we go help? Gwen arrived at a spot where the rainbow of light landed and looked at the group of people who had rushed over. Of course, Thor and Loki just helped us, now it's our turn to help them, the speaker was Tony. Seeing the commotion on the Rainbow Bridge, he and Loki rushed over. They immediately agreed to help Asgard. But, how do we get to Asgard? Loki, do you have a way? Loki nodded grimly. Asgard was under attack, but Heimdall only teleported Thor back to help, ignoring him. This stung Loki. I have a way to open a portal to Asgard, thank you. Magical sparks flickered and spun. Loki focused his senses on Asgard's location, then used his secret passage to bypass Asgard's special defenses. A moment later, the portal opened. Come on, follow me. Since Odin conquered the 9 realms, Asgard had enjoyed long periods of peace. But today, that peace was shattered. Beyond the continent of Asgard, on the Azure Ocean, a burly, robust old man walked slowly across the water towards the Asgardian palace in the center of the ocean. With each step, the old man's face grew younger, and the energy fluctuations within him intensified. The old man on the water was undoubtedly the Great Serpent, who had traveled from Earth across endless distances. The God of Terror in the Great Serpent's name refers to the God of Terror of Asgard. Therefore, as long as he set foot on Asgard, he could draw power from it. Even if this was Asgard from another universe. On the shore, the Asgardian army stood ready for battle. However, with each step the Great Serpent took, sea monsters emerged one by one, crowding behind it. And further away, a colossal wave was brewing. War was imminent. When it broke out, rivers of blood would flow. Rumble. Suddenly, a gigantic lightning dragon descended from the sky, striking the Great Serpent. The head of the Thunder Dragon was none other than Thor, clad in the destroyer armor and wielding Mjolnir. Facing Thor's sudden attack, the giant serpent remained calm, raising its warhammer to parry. The instant the two hammers, one large and one small, collided, terrifying lightning erupted, striking the serpent and the sea monster behind it. Immediately afterward, space itself was compressed and shattered by the two forces, unleashing an even more terrifying force, transforming into a shockwave that raged outwards from the two of them. Bang! Thor was sent flying backward to absorb the impact. The giant serpent, however, remained stationary, channeling the force of the impact into the ocean beneath its feet, causing surging undercurrents. Although their methods of dissipating the force differed, both were unharmed. However, the sea monster beside the serpent suffered greatly. First, it endured the electric shock, then the shockwave from the clash of forces, and finally the ocean's undercurrents. In just an instant, considerable casualties occurred. Is this your purpose, boy? As you wish. The giant serpent saw through Thor's intentions but remained unconcerned. Thor wanted to use the aftermath of their battle to reduce the number of sea monsters and ease the pressure on the Asgardian army on the shore. However, there was a problem he couldn't ignore: fighting the serpent in the ocean. And the ocean was the serpent's home ground. Thor had to carry the burden himself to lighten the load for the Asgardian warriors. Taking advantage of Thor's fall and loss of footing, the serpent rushed forward, leaping up and bringing its hammer down on Thor's head. It wanted to knock Thor into the water and gain an advantage. Bang! Thor hastily raised Mjolnir to parry, but was sent flying by the serpent's hammer and slammed into the water. The serpent followed closely behind, plunging into the water as well. Thor, on the Golden Palace, Odin and Frigga, watching this scene from afar, couldn't help but worry for Thor. Suddenly, lightning flashed. Thor, who had fallen into the sea, activated Mjolnir with all his might, unleashing the power of lightning, attempting to use the power of lightning to force back the serpent and then escape his predicament in the sea. However, the giant serpent chose to withstand Thor's lightning attack head-on, not missing the opportunity. It slammed its hammer down on Thor again. The home field advantage was evident. The serpent's power from the ocean floor remained unaffected, but Thor's power was significantly impacted. With one blow, Thor was slammed deeper into the ocean. Seeing this, the serpent pressed its advantage. But just then, an energy beam pierced through the ocean, striking Thor's back. The newcomer was none other than Loki, who had returned with reinforcements. Caught off guard, the serpent was injured and lost its chance to pursue Thor, forced to watch helplessly as Thor left the seabed in another direction. The Spear of Eternity? How did it end up in your hands? Loki didn't answer the serpent's question. He raised his spear and fired another energy beam. This time, however, the prepared serpent easily blocked it. Thor, come back to land. It's difficult for us to support you in the ocean. Although the attack was ineffective, the brief delay allowed Thor to retreat. After these few rounds of combat, Thor realized that on the ocean, he was no match for the serpent in a one-on-one fight. The serpent raised its hand, attempting to summon the Spear of Eternity, but received no response. The Spear of Eternity is mine. I am the rightful king of Asgard, the true father of the gods. Your father Odin is nothing but a usurper, taking everything that belongs to me and covering up the true history. Enraged, the serpent caused the ocean to tremble. A colossal wave surged towards Asgard. Loki, Tony, Wanda, Gwen, and Pietro stepped forward simultaneously, their magic flowing into the sea. The next moment, the surging wave abruptly stopped. The waves gradually subsided, and finally, the sea calmed. In the distance, in the Golden Palace, Odin watched Thor, Loki, and the others fight side by side. He was filled with joy. Brothers united. Working together with one heart. Reliable allies, providing timely support. God bless Asgard. Chapter 171 Defeat. When the giant serpent left Earth for Asgard, Russell and the Observer, who had been watching the spectacle from the moon, noticed it immediately. However, neither of them made a sound, simply following silently to continue watching the show. Observer, do you know what's going on? Why would a giant serpent from another universe come to Earth 404, in a void? Russell sat on a silver throne, asking the Observer, who stood slightly lower beside him. This was a position Russell had deliberately adjusted. From a distance, the Observer looked like his underling. I don't know. The Observer's tone was flat, unconsciously reverting to his aloof and indifferent demeanor. Russell shook his head and smiled helplessly. The Observer was now his important client, and he had forgiven him. However, his original plan to extract information from the Observer had failed. He would still have to ask the serpent himself later. But, when the time was right, he had to be cheeky. Really don't know, or are you pretending not to know? The Observer remained silent, ignoring Russell's humor. Boring. Seeing the Observer remain silent, Russell scoffed and refocused his attention on the battlefield in Asgard. Because the plan to flood Asgard had failed, the water monsters gathered by the serpent couldn't breach the Asgardian army's defenses, but the serpent wasn't discouraged. The first wave hadn't achieved anything, so they'd try again. Soon, a white line appeared on the horizon, growing larger as it traveled. By the time the white line reached the Asgardian shore, it had transformed into a 100-meter-high wave. This time, the serpent attacked along with the wave, attempting to prevent Loki, Tony, Wanda, Gwen, and the others from calming the storm. Thor, naturally, wouldn't stand idly by and directly confronted the serpent. The massive aftershocks of their clash of divine power interfered with Loki, Tony, and the others. The wave, as the serpent desired, crashed down. The giant waves couldn't breach Asgard's defenses, but the sea monsters seized the opportunity to surge ashore with the waves, engaging the Asgardian soldiers in battle. Seeing this, Loki, Tony, and the others stopped trying to stop the waves and joined the fray. Loki, Tony, and Wanda prioritized supporting Thor, joining the attack on the giant serpent. The others cooperated with the Asgardian warriors to clear out the sea monsters. Facing a 4-on-1 attack, the giant serpent remained unfazed. Or rather, after observing for a while, the serpent realized that, apart from Thor's hammer Mjolnir and Loki's spear Gungnir, other attacks didn't cause significant damage to its divine body. And any minor wounds, within Asgard, healed quickly. At this point, the weakness of Tony and Wanda, their lack of lethal weapons, became apparent once again. This weakness was discovered by both the serpent and Tony and Wanda. Wanda, we too will switch to support, focusing on limiting the serpent's movements, Tony instructed Wanda, abandoning the energy cannons and miniature missiles. Instead, he shifted his form, creating a clone using the form of Acorn, each wielding a magical whip. In the next instant, dozens of magical whips shot towards the serpent from all directions, binding it. Wanda's chaotic magic also shifted from attack to binding, working in conjunction with Tony to restrict the serpent's movements. Caught off guard by Tony and Wanda's sudden change in fighting style, the serpent was firmly bound. Seeing this opportunity, Thor threw Mjolnir, aiming directly at the immobilized serpent's face. Loki, meanwhile, quietly circled around to the serpent's side and rear, thrusting his spear of eternity towards the serpent's waist. Forced into a corner, the serpent unleashed its full power. A terrifying wave of energy surged forth from it, spreading outwards. Loki, who had rushed to the serpent's side and rear, was the first to be hit. He was struck head-on by the serpent's sudden burst of energy and sent flying backwards. Next was Tony. The clones Tony created using the form of Acorn were all dissipated by the serpent's energy impact, and his main body was sent flying. However, thanks to his suit, Tony was unharmed. Wanda and Thor, further away, easily blocked the attack using their respective methods. Wanda, watch out, Tony cried out, his suit scanning for a figure using the wave as cover to attack Wanda. However, compared to the speed of sound, the serpent was faster. Close in, the serpent raised its warhammer and smashed it down on Wanda's head. It was a classic case of picking on the weak. In the serpent's eyes, Wanda was the easiest target among the four. Her physical abilities were inferior to Thor and Loki, and she lacked armor. Her defense was undoubtedly the weakest of the four. The shield of Seraphim. This time, Wanda, prepared, reacted in time, using a more advanced magical shield. The serpent's warhammer struck the shield of Seraphim, knocking Wanda far back. The energy shield also became incredibly illusory. But in the end, it failed to break through. The giant serpent, its surprise attack thwarted, stood rooted to the spot, looking at its warhammer with some confusion. In the serpent's calculations, it should have shattered the energy shield with a single blow, killing the person before it in the process. It shouldn't have been blocked, merely repelled. His power is weakening. Loki, returning to the battlefield, discovered the problem. While the serpent's power, situated on Asgard, would be continuously replenished, this required a process, a time. The serpent's recent all-out attack had nearly exhausted its energy, and it hadn't recovered in a short period. This was the reason for its weakened power. The more fundamental reason was its lack of fear energy. It hadn't recovered to its maximum potential. Even on Asgard, in high-intensity combat, energy supply issues could arise. Having discovered the serpent's weakness, Thor and Loki didn't hesitate and immediately launched a fierce attack. Tony and Wanda, along with others, added fuel to the fire. The already energy-depleted serpent struggled even more, frequently sustaining additional injuries. And healing these injuries required energy. Insufficient energy, injuries, healing, yet even less energy. The serpent is trapped in a vicious cycle, its situation increasingly dire. Defeat seems inevitable. In the fiery hell, Mephisto watches the battle from the serpent's perspective. He's distressed. He went to great lengths to bring the serpent to Earth 404, hoping it would fight the Ancient One and Russell to a standstill, allowing him to reap the benefits. But before the Ancient One and Russell even appear, The serpent is on the verge of being overwhelmed and killed by Thor, Loki, Tony, and Wanda. He knows this isn't the serpent's true strength. The serpent's current state is due to its failure to absorb fear energy. If the serpent absorbed enough fear energy and returned to its peak, defeating the four before it would be effortless. But where has the fear energy on Earth gone? Mephisto has a guess. But that's not important now. What matters is Chapter 172. Mephisto raises his bet. Russell makes his move. Orochi can't lose like this. Besides him, I can't find another brute with that level of power to exploit. And Orochi still owes me a favor. In the fiery hell, Mephisto made his decision. He was going to raise the stakes. Orochi couldn't obtain enough fear energy to recover his strength on Earth 404, so he would pay the price. As for where this fear energy came from, that goes back to the major event on Earth 616, fear itself. In short, Mephisto had it. Asgard. Orochi realized the situation was dire and changed tactics, focusing on dodging and stalling for time. But as the water monsters were mostly eliminated, other superheroes and Asgardian elites joined the siege of Orochi. Suddenly, Orochi's situation worsened. Just then, a spatial rift was forcibly torn open above Asgard. Immediately afterward, endless fear energy surged forth, heading towards Orochi. Bathed in the energy of fear, the serpent's injuries healed rapidly, its aura rising steadily. Compared to Asgard's blessing, this energy of fear suited the serpent much better. The serpent transformed into a giant snake, roaring to the sky, venting its pent-up frustration. Then, divine power erupted, endless energy condensing in the serpent's mouth, ultimately transforming into a single breath. Roar. Wherever the energy breath passed, people and horses fell. Seeing this, Thor gathered lightning in his hand and swung Mjolnir. Mjolnir met the serpent's breath head-on. However, in mid-air, it was caught by the serpent's claws. Yes, claws. The giant snake, transformed from the serpent, had claws and wings. Meeting Thor's incredulous gaze, the giant snake gripped Mjolnir with a single claw, continuously applying force. Crack! Crack! Cracks appeared on Mjolnir. No, Thor roared, sensing a very ominous scene. Crack! Crack! Cracks spread across Thor's hammer. Finally, it was crushed by the giant serpent's single claw. This is my true power. I am an omnipotent god, the giant serpent spoke in human language. Feel fear, you ants. Feel the incomprehensible, irresistible fear. Bang! Loki fired a beam of energy from Spear of Eternity, interrupting the serpent's speech. With his strongest weapon, Thor's hammer, destroyed and temporarily rendered powerless, he had to step forward. With a thought, an invisible figure emerged from behind Loki, heading towards Odin's vault. The interrupted serpent showed no anger, merely glancing coldly at Loki. The next second, the enormous serpent charged at Loki with terrifying speed. Loki's eyes glowed green, Spear of Eternity in hand, ready for battle. If the serpent dared to open its mouth, he would deliver a devastating blow. However, just as it reached him, the serpent suddenly transformed back into human form. It swung its hammer, smashing it down towards Loki. Even though the serpent had recovered to its peak, it didn't want to easily test the sharpness of the Spear of Eternity. Loki reacted quickly, taking 2 steps back to dodge, while simultaneously thrusting the Spear of Eternity, piercing a bloody hole in the serpent's shoulder. Although his physical strength, speed, and reaction were inferior to the serpent's, Loki had one advantage: more time to compensate for his shortcomings in reaction and speed. Loki had already applied time magic to the battle, and this time, it had been successful. However, before Loki could retract his spear, the serpent's warhammer swept down. Loki crouched, narrowly avoiding the serpent's warhammer. At the same time, he forcefully pulled the Spear of Eternity down, widening the wound. Tear. Large chunks of flesh were torn off by Loki, but the serpent seemed oblivious. It raised its leg and kicked the crouching Loki. Bang! This time, Loki had no time to dodge, taking the full force of the serpent's kick, flying backward and crashing into several rows of Asgardian warriors. In mid-air, a trail of blood splattered. Loki, essentially a frost giant, possessed considerable physical strength. However, compared to the giant snake at this moment, he was no match. Even more critically, a green light flashed on the snake's shoulder, and its injuries healed rapidly. It then pursued the fallen Loki, pressing its advantage. Just then, Hulk pounced from the flank, knocking the snake off balance. Grabbing the snake's shoulder, Hulk prepared to deliver an over-the-shoulder throw. Bang! 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 Not satisfied with just one throw, Hulk grabbed the snake's arm and threw it several more times. However, just as Hulk was about to continue, he felt an immense force on his arm, a force that even Hulk couldn't resist. Bang! 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 The tables reversed, the snake grabbed Hulk's arm and slammed him to the ground. Tony, Wanda, and Gwen rushed to Hulk's aid. However, neither Tony's magic whip nor Gwen's spider silk broke easily under the snake's immense force. Fortunately, Wanda's chaos magic worked, successfully hindering the serpent's arm from continuing its slamming of Hulk. Just as Wanda briefly regained control of the serpent, a burst of icy energy suddenly shot out from among the fallen Asgardian warriors. Upon closer inspection, it was Loki's clone created using the Echoing form and subsequently departed. This Loki clone retrieved the casket of ice from Odin's vault. Sizzle Frost quickly appeared on the serpent's surface, freezing it into an ice sculpture. Was it over? No. Cracks appeared from within the ice sculpture, rapidly spreading to the surface. Seeing this, Loki intensified the use of the casket of ice. Pure icy energy shot out from the casket of ice, reinforcing the ice layer on the serpent's body. However, the ice layer itself was being destroyed by the serpent's surging energy. The casket of ice could not freeze the serpent. The thought had barely crossed Loki's mind when the ice sculpture of the frozen serpent shattered with a deafening roar. Immediately afterward, a surging wave of energy erupted, sweeping across everyone. The impact sent everyone flying, their injuries varying in severity. In the Golden Palace, Odin's expression was grave. Although his body was no longer fit for battle, Thor and Loki had been defeated, he had to step up. This was his responsibility as king. Seeing the energy channel that suddenly appeared above Asgard, Russell seemed thoughtful. He sensed a familiar presence. Mephisto's presence. Observer, the mastermind behind this incident is Mephisto, isn't he? The observer remained silent. I'll take your silence as agreement. The observer still didn't speak. The observer, remembered his original intentions and never forgot his mission. He didn't interfere in the affairs of any life form in the universe, only silently observing and recording from the sidelines. Seeing that the observer remained silent, Russell stopped teasing him. He took a step forward, directly arriving at the battlefield of Asgard. A fully restored Orochi would be a bit overpowered by today's superheroes. But no problem. Russell can still handle it with ease. Chapter 173 Russell, how about it? Isn't it great value for money? It wasn't just Odin. Seeing Thor and Loki fall one after another, the hearts of the other Asgardians sank to the bottom. But the Asgardian warriors were not afraid of death. At worst, they'd go to Valhalla. After the energy shock subsided, the Asgardian warriors rose again, formed battle formations, and surrounded the giant serpent. Thor also rallied, picked up a longsword, and prepared to fight again. Even without Mjolnir, he could defeat the giant serpent. Hulk shook his head, inspired by the Asgardian warriors, and also stood up. He was thick-skinned and wouldn't be injured by this energy shock. As for Tony, he laid down. The environment of Asgard was not suitable for his fighting. In Asgard, space was restricted, and portal magic couldn't be used. For Tony, this greatly affected his mobility. And, directly, it prevented him from using his ultimate attack, Celestial Meteor. Although, his ultimate attack was unlikely to hit the giant serpent. Even if it had hit the giant serpent, it wouldn't cause much damage. Of course, the most important point. Because he was lying down, he could see the person in the sky, Russell. At this moment, Russell had arrived above the battlefield in Asgard. Tony zoomed in on the image and saw that Russell seemed to be extending a finger, pointing towards the giant serpent below. What was Russell doing? Tony was puzzled. But the people on the battlefield didn't share Tony's confusion. Tony was observing using the visual sensors on his suit and zooming in on the image, only seeing Russell and the area around him. The others, however, had all five senses. The first thing they sensed was a powerful gust of air descending from the sky. Everyone looked up and saw a finger, traversing endless space. Russell, Gwen, Wanda, and Gaia, who had fought alongside them but previously didn't even deserve a name, exclaimed in surprise. They had seen this scene in the nightmare dimension. Only, back then it was a hand, and now it was a finger. Rumble. As the finger swept across, the air exploded with a series of booming sounds. As the finger continued to press down, Gwen and the others finally understood why it was a finger and not a hand this time. Even if Finger's cross-sectional area far exceeded the size of the battlefield. If it were the entire palm, it would probably be larger than the entirety of Asgard. A moment later, as the finger continued to press down, Gwen and the others overturned their previous conclusions. Even if Finger's cross-sectional area exceeded that of Asgard. However, in that case, even if Russell killed the serpent, Asgard would perish along with it, wouldn't it? Tony finally understood what Russell was doing. Russell's finger obscured the entire sky. Through the camera lens on his suit, Tony could clearly see the fingerprint creases, the keratinocytes within them, and the nuclei and mitochondria within those keratinocytes. Jarvis, cancel the zoom, sir, it's cancelled. Silence. Looking at the finger in the sky, larger than the entirety of Asgard and impossible to see in its entirety, the entire battlefield fell silent. Playing tricks, the others were terrified, but the serpent was not. With its full power, it could destroy Asgard. Naturally, it could also destroy the giant finger before them. With unwavering determination, the great serpent unleashed its full power, its aura so overwhelming that everyone present could barely lift their heads. Only then did Thor, Loki, and the others realize that what they had seen before was far from the great serpent's full strength. With a heavy stomp on the ground, the great serpent soared into the sky. Its warhammer, glowing with divine light, slammed down towards the giant finger. The warhammer struck the giant finger in the sky, but silently, without a sound. This was completely different from what the great serpent and the others had expected. They had anticipated a clash of heaven and earth, a collision that would shake the very heavens and earth. The next moment, the giant finger moved. An arm sprouted from the fingertip. A finger extended from the arm, pointing at the great serpent. And from the fingertip of the finger, another finger extended. Again and again, the fingertip continued to grow an arm, becoming smaller and smaller. After countless shrinkings, the finger finally reached the size of a normal person, or rather, the size of Russell himself. It gently touched the great serpent's forehead. The great serpent unleashed its full power, its power earth-shattering. The giant serpent swung its warhammer at the finger, but as before, it failed to create any ripples. The finger continued its slow, steady approach towards his forehead. The serpent dodged, moving swiftly. But upon closer inspection, the distance between the finger and him was decreasing at a steady pace. The serpent tore through Asgardian space and teleported away. Looking up, it saw the finger still following. Finally, it gently touched his forehead. At that moment, the serpent understood. The owner of the finger was far more powerful than him. Before, it had only been toying with him. "Who are you?" These were the serpent's last words. He was the highest-ranking god in Asgard, the highest-ranking god after the many ancient gods of Earth. Only those who stood at the pinnacle of the multiverse could kill him without him having any power to resist. The finger touched the serpent's forehead, and the serpent's consciousness was instantly obliterated by Russell. Although his soul wasn't completely destroyed, it completely extinguished any hope of resurrection. Then, a suction force emanated from the finger, engulfing the serpent, leaving not a trace. Those who fall into Russell's hands have no chance of going to hell. Retracting his finger, Russell looked at the observer who had followed him and asked with a smile, "So, 2 billion units of energy for one look, isn't it well worth it?" Russell wasn't toying with the serpent, but rather flexing his muscles. Faced with Russell's question, the observer was speechless, feeling a wave of fear. The serpent, now back to its peak, had reached the level of a strong dimensional lord, its direct combat strength no less than his own. And Russell could easily crush such a serpent with a single finger. In other words, if he hadn't decisively slipped away earlier, paying to save his life, he would already be crushed to death by Russell. Russell's godlike strength is formidable. 2 billion units of energy to see you act once is indeed well worth it, the observer said against his conscience. 2 billion energy for just one look at Russell was definitely a loss, a huge loss. It would be more reasonable to ask Russell to act once. However, the observer proved it with his actions. If needed, he could also thoroughly study emotional intelligence. "Would you like to see it again?" Russell asked. "God, Russell, what do you mean?" The observer's expression shifted. He wanted to ask Russell if he was going to take action against Mephisto, but he didn't know if Russell already knew that Mephisto was the mastermind. If Russell didn't know, asking directly would expose Mephisto and break his oath. After all, they, the observers, were absolutely neutral. "That's right, I'm going to take action against Mephisto." "Observer, are you interested in witnessing it?" The observer nodded without hesitation. Mephisto was no ordinary dimensional lord. 2 billion energy points to watch a powerful god cause him trouble was well worth it. Chapter 174 Reactions from all parties. What a loss. This was Mephisto's first reaction when he saw the serpent being instantly obliterated by a single finger that descended from the sky. Not only was his plan to use the serpent against the Ancient One and Russell ruined, but the additional fear energy he had added to the serpent, and the promise of assistance he received for releasing it, were also gone. Who was he? Who was the owner of that shimmering white finger that killed the serpent? This was Mephisto's second reaction. Although the multiverse is infinitely vast and contains countless possibilities, a god like the serpent is considered a powerful being in the multiverse. Within the multiverse, they could roam freely. Gods of a higher level almost never interfere in worldly affairs and rarely intervene directly in the affairs of the multiverse. Usually, they send their apostles to exercise their will. The Vishanti, for example, sent his sorcerer supreme to guard a real universe. But that finger just now clearly indicated that a higher-level god had personally intervened. Won't he come looking for trouble with me? This was Mephisto's third reaction. When he transferred energy to the serpent, he made some disguises. Normally, ordinary methods wouldn't be able to track him. Even if they did, he wouldn't be afraid. But the appearance of that finger clearly made things unusual. No, he had to prepare for the worst. Without hesitation, Mephisto immediately activated a defensive array of the fiery hell, sealing off all entrances and exits to the entire dimension, temporarily severing the connection between the hell dimension and other real universes, rendering the entire hell dimension silent. In this way, those outside the fiery hell would lose its coordinates and would be unable to arrive directly via teleportation, only able to fly over through the super vortex. But Mephisto still felt uneasy. After a moment's hesitation, he gritted his teeth. A strategic retreat. He wasn't afraid of the finger's owner, he was simply trying to preserve the fiery hell's remaining strength. As for the loss of the right to extradite souls from these real universe life-bearing planets, Mephisto couldn't care less. As long as the green hills remain, there's always firewood to burn. Having made up his mind, Mephisto no longer hesitated, his crimson divine power surging, communicating with the fiery hell. Rumble. The fiery dimension trembled, and after a moment, like a spaceship, it slowly began to accelerate. Finally, it headed towards the direction of the super vortex. You guys say that's Russell? The owner of the finger is Russell. Thor, who was about to help Loki up after seeing the giant snake escape, couldn't help but ask when he heard Gwen and Wanda's mutterings. It should be Russell. Gwen was also a little uncertain. Not long ago in the nightmare dimension, I saw him use a similar move, also a very large thing falling from the sky. But that time it wasn't a finger, but a palm. It's Russell. I saw him. After the battle ended, Tony stepped out of his suit. He must have been watching from the sky the whole time we were fighting. Jarvis just happened to capture the scene of him sticking out a finger and pointing it downwards when I fell. Moreover, he told me before that he would only intervene when we encountered an opponent we couldn't handle. Snap. That explains it. Thor clapped his hands, suddenly realizing, no wonder Russell didn't show up during our fight. Thor inadvertently pulled his hand away, and Loki, unlucky enough to fall to the ground again. Thor, if you don't want to help me, you can find someone else, Loki said gruffly. Oh, sorry, little brother. Thor bent down and helped Loki up again, handing the weakened Loki to a guard and instructing him to take Loki away for treatment. In the battle with the giant serpent, only Loki and Hulk received a direct hit from the serpent at its peak. Loki was kicked and seriously injured. Hulk was thrown around a few times but was completely unharmed. Perhaps this was the difference between a mage and a tank. It seems the battle is over. Seeing the surrounding sea monsters suddenly lose their fighting spirit and retreat haphazardly towards the ocean, Thor understood that the giant serpent had lost control of them. He didn't know if the serpent had escaped, been killed, or captured by Russell. But at least, the battle in Asgard was over. Everyone, go back and rest for a while. Asgard will hold a victory celebration for you afterwards. Thor greeted the Earth superheroes who had gone to provide support, instructing the guards to take them away to rest and make sure they were well taken care of. Afterwards, he went alone to the Golden Palace to report the results to his father, Odin, and mother, Frigga. Although, most of them themselves had been following the battle and were fully aware of the outcome. In the Golden Palace, Odin still stood by the window, overlooking Asgard below. His single eye constantly moved, taking in the entire panorama of Asgard, observing carefully. Below, The dense cluster of golden buildings remained unaffected by the coastal battle. In fact, most Asgardians were completely unaware of the battle that had just taken place on the coast. While the coastal battle raged, the country remained peaceful and prosperous. Odin was very satisfied. As the king of Asgard, he had once again protected the peace of Asgard. The only flaw was the enormous finger that descended from the sky, too ostentatious and conspicuous, causing some commotion. And, who owned this giant finger? The Celestials? While their forms were enormous, none were quite as exaggerated as this finger being comparable to the entirety of Asgard. Or perhaps some other unnamed ancient god? It seemed they were friend, not foe. Thump thump thump. Without turning around, Odin recognized the footsteps of his eldest son, Thor. Thor, this time, you and Loki did a great job. You protected the peace of the 9 realms, the peace of the kingdom. Father, it was our duty. Thor's voice was flat, even somewhat dejected. Normally, Odin's praise would excite him. But now, he had just lost his Mjolnir and was in grief. Thor, you just repelled a powerful enemy, why are you so dejected? Odin heard the dejection in Thor's voice and asked directly. Father, Mjolnir is shattered. Mentioning the broken Mjolnir, Thor's voice was filled with uncontrollable despair. What god are you? The god of hammers, or the god of thunder? That hammer merely helps you control your power, gathering it into the hammer. It was never the source of your power. Odin withdrew his gaze from Asgard below and looked at Thor. Thor, my son. You fought bravely against the invading enemy, protecting Asgard, and I am proud of you. But seeing you so dejected now makes me very unhappy. Chapter 175. Mephisto escaped. In the Golden Hall, Odin and Thor's conversation continued. Thor, Mjolnir is important. It's your weapon, enhancing your attack power and making you invincible. But it's not that important, it's just your weapon, not your source of power. If a weapon breaks, you can repair it or forge a new one. Thor nodded gravely. I understand, father. But Mjolnir isn't just my weapon, it's also my brother, my son. Odin, speechless, had to skip the topic. Looking at the now calm, azure sky, Odin asked, Thor, do you know who owns that giant finger in the sky? After Thor and Loki's defeat, Odin was prepared to personally enter the fray. He was ready to risk his life to fight the serpent to the death. He didn't have much time left anyway. However, he was old, and his body could no longer withstand the increasing power. He wasn't confident he could kill the serpent before heading to Valhalla. Fortunately, the owner of this giant finger easily changed the course of the battle with a single gesture. Russell. I heard Tony and the others say the finger's owner is Russell, the mage Russell. Odin's tone was tinged with doubt. He remembered Russell, that young and powerful mage. In his perception, this young mage possessed power comparable to his own in his youth. Quite powerful indeed. However, compared to the owner of the finger in the sky, he was far inferior. Moreover, their sizes didn't match. Thor, is the owner of the giant finger in the sky the mage Russell? Or is the giant finger in the sky a spell cast by the mage Russell? Odin considered a possibility. That is, the giant finger in the sky wasn't part of a god's body, but a spell. Although this was still quite exaggerated, it was barely plausible. A mage, after all, could sacrifice something to borrow the power of an ancient god. To unleash a move of astonishing power, it wasn't impossible. I don't know, Thor shook his head. Never mind, Odin sighed, gesturing for Thor to step back. Peeping into someone else's power could easily lead to misunderstandings. In these turbulent times, Odin didn't want to create unnecessary trouble and push away his former allies. Bigger is stronger. Besides Thor and Odin, several other Earth superheroes were also shocked by Russell's giant finger falling from the sky and were discussing it animatedly. Was that finger in the sky really Russell's? It was so big, how heavy must it be? Dr. Banner, do you think Hulk could lift it? Pietro asked Dr. Banner, who had returned to his normal human form. In his understanding, Hulk was the most powerful being. Well, that depends on what the finger is made of, its density, that's how you calculate its mass. And after getting the mass, you still need to consider the gravity of the environment to calculate how much force it would take to lift that finger. Considering Pietro's education level, Dr. Banner explained in simple terms as much as possible. So, can Hulk lift it? I don't know. Dr. Banner stroked his chin, giving his conclusion. He was now somewhat doubtful. In fact, given the size of that finger, if it were a living organism, its density would far exceed that of an ordinary human body, and its mass would be terrifyingly high. At least, far exceeding that of an ordinary planet. Yet, despite the finger being so close to them, he didn't feel any force from it. This is abnormal. The material that makes up that finger must be very special. I suspect its density might be 0, or close to 0. Otherwise, we should have felt a gravitational pull between that finger and us just now. Dr. Banner boldly stated his guess, and Tony nodded in agreement. Now that Dr. Banner mentions it, this material is indeed very strange, somewhat defying the laws of physics. I really hope we can study it. The allure of a new material to researchers like Tony and Dr. Banner is no less than. Where's Russell? Next time we see Russell, we'll ask him for some to study. Where did Russell go? Russell is currently in the super cyclone. Originally, he planned to teleport directly into Mephisto's hell. Previously, the Ancient One had told Russell the coordinates of Mephisto's hell, and Russell had already tried to do so once. However, this time it failed. Mephisto's hell was sealed off, and he couldn't sense it. Left with no other option, Russell and the Observer had to fly through the supercycloid. Anyway, at his speed, it wouldn't take long. However, this time the Observer held him back. As everyone knows, when several people run together, the slowest person determines the speed. The Observer's flying speed is far slower than Russell's, and he adheres to his principles, refusing Russell's help. In the Observer's words, they are absolutely neutral, merely recorders and witnesses. They will neither help nor accept help from any party. Their main principle is fairness and impartiality, and they will never interfere. As for why he pays Russell for observation, the energy he gives Russell, and whether it has interfered with the development of cosmic affairs, Russell didn't ask, just to save face for his benefactor. The Observer's hypocrisy is no secret. Staring at the empty area before him, Russell was lost in thought. Mephisto ran away? He took that entire hell dimension with him? What happened to the saying, the monk may run, but the temple remains? Focusing his mind, Russell's divine power surged, emitting bursts of green fluorescence. He wanted to try reversing time and space within the super vortex to see where Mephisto and his fiery hell had gone. The green fluorescence enveloped the vast area, attempting to flow backward in time and reverse space-time. However, there was no reaction. The area enveloped by the green light showed no response. It was as if the concepts of time and space did not exist here. Russell withdrew his divine power and carefully sensed the surroundings, his brows furrowing deeper and deeper. Trouble. There were no concepts of time and space within the super vortex. Time magic could not be used here. This was a world of information. Many behaviors that would leave obvious traces in the real universe and dimensional worlds would be submerged in the ocean of information here, difficult to detect. Moreover, because the Observer was holding him back, Russell had arrived too late. Mephisto, carrying the traces of Hell's departure, has been submerged in the sea of information. With a long sigh, Russell looked at the Observer, his expression grim. He had also suffered a great loss this time. On one hand, he had lost the opportunity to extort another sum from Mephisto. On the other hand, without finding Mephisto, he didn't know if the Observer would still be willing to pay for watching the show. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.